And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here. Well, at the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Our new facility in the bunker in La Providence, Rhode Island, the Naked City, the city of, 300,000+ stories. We're going to try and talk about one of them tonight. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, the mothership, CoalitionRadio.us. Please take a moment to like us, follow us, subscribe to us, whatever it is that you do, please do it. Mothers, let's just say this, that social media, as much as some folks prefer to hate it, is the mother's milk, if you will, of independent media like this show. This show needs outlets, listeners, to get through the sort of white fog. There's 300 stations and nothing on Bruce Springsteen-esque world that we live in. Astonishingly, even in the age of COVID-19, the sheer amount of nonsense that fills up the air is, well, it's magical. Well, we had a little bit of adjustment in programming tonight. We're running just a couple of minutes late. Our original host, Alex Andrews, is the head of SWAP Behind Bars. She's been pulled away to do what Alex always seems to do, which is run interference for a crisis somewhere in these United States. This is someone who's joined us on the Coalition on a number of occasions. She qualifies for what we call a frequent offender status. She has been helping others selflessly now for years, essentially being on call to an entire nation of folks who, whether it be housing issues, legal issues, folks who are both incarcerated and folks who may have been incarcerated. She is one of these magical life forces in the decriminalization movement that truly, I mean, I think we're beyond walking the walk. So in her place, joining us on the fly, and it took us a few minutes to get the link going, but great thanks to her. Kristen, welcome to the Coalition.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, no, we haven't met, I don't believe, and I don't know if we've spoken before. So just give us a little bit of background on your involvement in SWAP Behind Bars and what programs you're responsible for.
I'm actually the outreach coordinator, and I handle all of the street-based outreach in the West Central Florida, St. Pete, Tampa, Orlando. We do testing for Hep C and HIV, and hand out food and clothing items and hygiene items and things like that. That's what my main focus is.
No, that's wonderful. Now, within the adult entertainment industry, within the world of sex workers, there is clearly a rainbow, a mosaic of occupations, emphasis, approaches, as well as economics. And so, for every individual that read about might be an escort or be a highly compensated adult film star, there are a number of folks who are involved in we call survival sex. And there are a number of people who, even in normal times, even say 3 weeks ago when we were in the midst of by some accounts anyway, I'll be careful here, by somebody's accounts, we're in the middle of this wonderful, wonderful economy. And yet folks, even before the events of the last few weeks, were being increasingly marginalized. What is this state of economically before COVID, before the plague, as we call it here? What were some of the challenges folks were running into?
Well, I mean, they've been running into a lot of challenges since Cessna FOSTA went into place and a lot of the online spaces went down. But that's been going on that was our crisis and has been going on for our crisis, in the sex work world for 2 years now. I mean, we run into the constant threat of law enforcement and things like that always. Mm-hmm. So that's not a unexpected risk in
Right.
most places in this country, unfortunately.
This show broadcasts out of Providence, Rhode Island, which is, I don't know if you're a sports fan or not, is essentially the home of the New England Patriots, a guy named Robert Kraft. And we all got a little bit of taste, if you will, of law enforcement in the rather awkward situation that happened during the Super Bowl last year when Mr. Kraft was arrested in the as he left a massage parlor in Florida. Are those the type of setups and scams that the police are typically perpetrating on folks in your community in order to get a cheap arrest and to make their numbers work?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's counties in all over that will set up stings in hotels and run ads for both clients and, sex workers themselves answering their ads. There's constant stings. Polk County here in Florida is famous for it. That's where they make most of their money is from sex workers and locking up people in nonviolent
from your perspective.
charges.
From your perspective, have you ever had that opportunity to just simply ask one of them why? I mean, what is, again, the mantra here at our show is that consensual sex work is in fact a consensual act between two adults who are one is compensating the other. We all the silliness aside, because it's a deadly serious issue about relationships that exist in the quote unquote vanilla work. There should be no laws being broken. I refuse to refer to something like this as a victimless crime because there is no victim, and there should be no crime. So, is anyone question them about this incredible emphasis they have on what I call lifestyle quote unquote criminality?
Are you talking about the cops or the politicians that keep
Right. Yeah.
promoting and voting for bills that are against us? Because, I've spoken with the politicians and flat out, they don't care about us. And the cops that run the beats in some counties, in some areas, will leave. But in others, like, they don't give you a break. They don't care. It's their job. It's their job, so they're going to do it. And when you talk about the politicians who can actually change the laws, they seem to forget that they're the ones in the power to change the laws and not just take money from people that can give it to them to pass laws that they want.
How expensive? And Florida is a very challenging place to me because, on one hand, I've spent a fair amount of time there. You've got some areas where quite frankly, the economy is very difficult. And not a lot of industry in certain parts, and yet you've got the pricing pressure on homes and rentals based on vacation properties and resorts. How difficult is it for folks to make a living in your area, in the Tampa area, outside of sex work? I mean, how would you describe the economy for regular folks?
Okay, I'm only smiling and laughing because before I became a sex worker myself, I was holding down 2 minimum wage jobs at the same time, and I could not afford to maintain both rent and transportation. Mm-hmm. It was a choice every month between, am I going to pay rent on time, or am I going to eat this month or be able to get to work this month?
Right. Right.
You can't survive on the minimum wage pay that they give around here with the cost of living in Florida, in most of the U.S.
No, it's a couple of books have been written about it. One of them, a book called Working, and in which the protagonist, a middle-aged woman, attempted to survive, and I'll double-check that title, but she attempted to survive on a couple incomes simultaneously and wanted to understand what it would be like to live that way. At one point, she was, I believe, working in a Walmart and as a waitress. At another point, working at a hotel, doing cleaning and laundry. The typical quote unquote entry jobs that are very difficult given, again, like as you mentioned, the high cost of living in resort areas. And it's pretty provocative stuff. I'm a kind of a free market person myself, but this book puts the lie to the notion that there are a lot of people out there that aren't really working really, really hard, bone crushing, soul wrenching jobs in order to get by. So at a certain level, sex work, because of, it has got to be attractive to a number of people. I mean, was your standard of living better than, say, in working in the retail environment, the retail economy?
Yes. Yes. Look, sex work. When I personally, my own story, when I found sex work, it allowed me to move in off the streets. Because by the time I started doing sex work, I was living on the streets myself.
Right.
I was breaking into cars to sleep at night, so it allowed me to provide for myself and my friends. I was able to provide fully for my friend who was in the hospital, so I was able to take her out and pay all of her bills for well over a year. So my standard of living went greatly.
So at least when you were making the transition, is it fair, and this is a judgment-free zone, was it fair to say that you were essentially in the survival sex zone, where it was literally a way to put a roof over your head?
Absolutely. And with the way things are now, for me personally, it's safe to say that I am in that zone myself.
Right. Because you're doing outreach, you're doing the Lord's work, you're literally on the streets, seeing the situation. And again, I'm essentially separating the show into two parts: before COVID, before Corona, and now afterwards. Now, in the past few years, folks who may or may not be acquainted with the legal environment surrounding sex work, the federal government, in its infinite wisdom, and I'm being very sarcastic here, decided to pass something called FOSTA and SESTA. One was a House bill, one was a Senate bill, which essentially was claimed that it was aimed at sex trafficking. Anyone who actually studies FBI and published government statistics on sex trafficking knows that it is the hype versus the reality are two very, very different things. As is typical, the unintended consequences were brutal. It took a lot of sex workers who were able to use the net web to quite frankly charge more, to find alternatives within the adult entertainment industry, to create, using screening sites, create barriers to people who are bad actors, bad players within the adult entertainment scene. It provided a lot of people with a structure and a hope and a way of marketing that had really been critical. It eliminated critical challenges to safety over a number of years. So now, in light of that, you've got folks looking to sex work as a manager of survival. It's happening in every city in America, including Providence. And again, if you were to go to Tampa, St. Pete, Western Florida, you would see a tremendous amount of wealth. But buried behind those streets, in the side streets, are folks who are literally just getting by, and essentially being forced onto the street. It's now. Alex had mentioned to me, are you involved with needle exchange programs as well? Is that part of it? I
am.
Tell us a little bit about that.
I am. I've been told by sheer numbers we run the largest needle exchange in Central Florida.
Wow.
I hand out clean needles and cookers and tie-offs and Narcan and literally anything to make sure that they are staying safe and that they know that somebody loves them. Somebody loves them. Somebody cares. Um, that's another aspect of the outreach that we do. And again, we do that in Tampa, St. Pete, Orlando, Pinellas Hillsborough, Pasco.
What is this primarily for folks who are cooking for meth, or is it folks who are? I mean, what seems to be on the streets the most right now, at least in Florida?
It's a fair mixture between heroin and methamphetamines, depending on what area you're in.
Right.
But the heroin opiate craze, that's all over. Mm-hmm. That's we hand out fentanyl test strips too. Well, we can get those.
Right. Are fentanyl test strips legal in Florida? I know that we just recently made them legal here in Rhode Island. Is what you're doing, quote unquote, been deigned to be legal by those that we must obey? And how are you getting hold of fentanyl test strips? Is it private donations?
Yes, private donations. Yeah. It walks that gray line of legality. They legalized needle exchanges in the state. They stated that no federal, state, county funds can be utilized to fund it. There's another needle exchange that I work closely with in the Tampa area, Tampa Bay Harm Reduction.
Right.
And we are both of our orgs are part of a larger coalition of other underground organizations in Florida that are also doing the needle exchange and Narcan distribution.
Mm-hmm. So
it's just a matter of making things safer,
right,
for the areas that we're all in, mm-hmm. and a matter of making things safer for the individuals that are utilizing.
Absolutely. There's no doubt that the 3 or 4 prong, if you will, availability of fentanyl test strips, Narcan, condoms, and I know I'm missing something here, but I said Narcan test strips and also needles are just a critical mm-hmm. mix. Here in Rhode Island, just to tell a story, years and years ago, at the beginning of the HIV crisis, the geniuses who ran Rhode Island decided that it would be they would not support needle exchanges. They would, in fact, make possession of needles and a whole bunch of drug paraphernalia illegal. And boy, did they show us. As a result, the incidence of HIV spiked and went through the roof, and both amongst the quote-unquote gay and straight communities. And as a result, people died. It just, in terms of sheer humanity, the availability of those 4 categories, which quite frankly are incredibly inexpensive when you compare it to the cost of incarceration, the human cost of suffering, is just, it's astonishing that people have to fight for those resources that we, and I'm a libertarian, so I believe in folks voluntarily donating to support that. Which, by the way, this entire show is going to be a pitch for all of you at some point to send some money to Alex. I've done it, and it's a wonderful organization.
Yes.
Every money. Yes, the overhead is so low. Every penny they get literally goes to people in need. It's breathtaking to watch. So you in a sense, you are on the bleeding edge of the challenges facing marginalized people on the streets in Western and Central Florida. Is that a fair statement?
That's absolutely correct. This is what I am not used to doing, the interviews.
No, you're great. You're great. I do this all the time, and I think yours is a powerful voice that needs to be heard. Alex. We're gonna have Alex on again in another couple of days or in a week when she can squeeze in the time. For Alex and a handful of people in the sex worker community, we have an open door here. Anytime you want to call to complain about something, bitch, vent, it's all good. Same thing for you. If you're out on the streets one day and you want to call in, we'll have you come on the show and just let it loose, because this is reality.
I have an amazing.
Go ahead.
I have an amazing work partner that I work with, Shantae. Mm-hmm. helped completely turn around the Orlando operation and make it one that was functionable because I
Right.
was in over my head. So yeah, we could definitely do that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, and I get down there from time to time. So I'd love to. I hope sometime in the future I get to meet you guys. But so here's the reality that you were dealing with a couple weeks ago: high cost of living, primarily a retail environment, if you will, service type industry for work. Folks who are challenged by a variety of circumstances that have led them to an opioid addiction and or other chemical dependencies, and you're dealing with that. You're just kind of probably feeling like you're holding off the attack. I know people who do it here in Rhode Island. It's everywhere, and a lot of awfully good people get caught up in what we call the prison pipeline here, and or issues surrounding surrounding dependencies. It's sadly it's part of life, and we can talk another time about the government policies that have made this easier, but this is what you're dealing with every day, right?
Absolutely, and they tie all that prison pipeline right into the drug dependence community and utilize that community in order to feed the pipeline. Like, let's be real here.
Yeah, the government makes a lot of money. It's very expensive to be poor. I'm just going to put that out there. It's very expensive to be poor. Yeah.
Yes.
The civic fines, the penalties. In here in Providence, we have something called the Jump Out Boys, which is a supposedly anti-gang police, which they call them Jump Out Boys because they pull up onto the curb and jump out of their cars, and look for everything from gang affiliations to, what I'll call routine dependency issues, and let the tickets start going. And it starts as a civil infraction, and then ultimately, if folks are marginalized and unable to pay these fines, they start to broach into the criminal. Then you get a bench warrant, and then you end up in jail. And sometimes that's sometimes when you meet Alex, or you guys. I mean, it's
wow.
Wow. And so that's what's got to stop. We are needlessly sacrificing our population at the altar of profit for the government and profit for the prison industrial industry, and increased funding and rationalizations for a police force. It's really that simple. It's a tremendous amount of human suffering could be eliminated if we started to just simply look away from ordinary drug use and ordinary consensual sexual relations between adults that involve money as a crime. We end that, and people's lives it's like break glass, add water. People's lives are better. It baffles me. So that's what you were facing up until a couple weeks ago. Again, this sort of trench warfare where folks are getting sick on the streets, and you're doing your best to do them. Now, SWAT behind bars, by definition, also deals with folks who are incarcerated or are just removed from the penal system. Is that part of your job as well? Do you interface with people who are just out of prison?
I do. I handle pen pals and things like that. I haven't had the pleasure of working with individuals that have just been released yet, but I'm hoping to move up into that shortly.
Okay, tell us about the pen pals though. That's actually one of the earliest programs in SWAP, and it's provocative stuff. Yeah. Tell us how that works.
Well, we match individuals on the outside with individuals that are incarcerated so that they have people to talk to, because that is one of the worst things to experience inside, is to not get any mail. And when you don't get any mail, the other individuals see that and they know that you're vulnerable because you don't have anybody. So if you get mail, you're seen as less vulnerable. And also,
really? So,
yeah, it's interesting how that, yes.
So your status in all the cryptic ways that folks who are incarcerated judge each other, the contacts with you have, the normal contacts you have with the outside, no criminality, no one sneaking in any tools to be used, and nothing. Just simply letters from home or letters from friends or letters from new friends have a positive impact, not just on folks in terms of their reaction or their individual spirit. It's actually reflected to the outside prison population.
Yeah, and also the guards and things, because then they see that you are cared for.
Think about that for a second. Your worth as a human being is being interpreted by law enforcement based on your ability to connect with people outside. Wow.
Let's be honest, they're putting people in cage. They don't see individuals as having worth. They're putting them in cages.
True.
They already don't see value.
Right.
We're talking law enforcement here.
If you don't mind me asking a personal question, and at any time, if I ask you a question, you can tell me to mind my own business. Had you been incarcerated in Florida?
Not as an adult.
Not as an adult. Okay. All right. So we were part of the juvenile system. Okay. When folks are, in particularly in the cities that you work in, are they going typically to a state facility, a county facility, or is this just all over the place? It just depends who happens to pick you up.
So in Pinellas County and Hillsborough County, the cities don't have individual jails. They transfer you directly to the county facility for regardless of what it is, and anything under a year and a day, you stay at the county facility. Anything sentenced over a year, you go straight into prison.
So in a very real sense, for a lot of folks, you're being ripped from your community, which makes it even more difficult for folks to stay in contact with you in terms of visitation.
Oh yeah, you're definitely being ripped from your community. They're not putting people in the closest prison to them. They're putting wherever they have population.
Right. And in situations like this, you know, and I have a soft spot in my heart for public defenders, but at the same time, know a little bit about the weakness of the system. In your experience, have friends of yours, folks who are being helped by your organization, are they getting quality legal care, or is that a crapshoot? Is that just up to the pure luck sometimes?
Public defenders are overworked. They have too many cases, and they typically don't have time to give quality care to the cases. You're getting decent legal representation if you can pay for it, or if an organization can pay for it, or somebody can pay for it. Because the public defenders, that's a crapshoot. So
that whole notion when we go to the movies and watch on the movies that someone takes a special interest in your case and manages to, harness CSI investigators and fingerprints and manages to get it done within the space of an hour, I'm thinking that's largely fiction. That's not really the reality, is it?
That's very, very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Very rare. Public defenders, more often than not, in individuals that I've seen, having to experience the system, they're asking you to plead out. They're asking to plead out. They're working out deals to just plead out. Because that's what the prosecution is hoping for. And if everybody that they arrested went to trial, they wouldn't be able to have trials. There would be no room in jails. It would clog the system.
Well, and to your point, I'm going to use a very quaint analogy. It's almost silly to compare because we're talking a very real difference in human drama, if you will. But here in Rhode Island, about a year and a half ago, they installed speed cameras, and this should be no surprise. They put them in the most marginalized communities. The tonier parts of town didn't quite see as many speed cameras. And the word went out that everybody should, rather than just pay the ticket, just file for a court date. And it literally brought the court system to a screeching halt because they'd written thousands of these tickets. And now all of a sudden they realize, as we all do, that the big lie was that they had the ability, if you will, to deal with this, and they don't. They're quite capable of passing laws that neither they nor the individuals have the capacity or the resources to engage in, and yet they go past more of them. Wow. Now, in Rhode Island and across the country, there are different states that have something called a Good Samaritan law, which is, for folks who aren't familiar with it, if in fact you're at the scene of where rescue needs to be called because of the use of drugs, the use of illegal narcotics, the folks who make that call, who bring people in, who do the, quote unquote do the right thing, do so at no legal risk to themselves. Police are under orders to stand down effectively and not pursue legal charges against that. Does anything like that exist in, say, Pinellas or any of the counties that you work in?
Yes. Yes, it does.
I'm sensing a butt
That
here.
doesn't mean that. Well, because that doesn't mean that they don't target them later.
Right.
They
okay.
don't target those locations or those people later. Like, that doesn't.
Right.
I mean, there was a place in, and I mean, granted, this was a sales point location in Pinellas not that long ago, but they got popped because they got raided because they literally had too many overdoses in their house within a certain month period.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was reading the news article and it was like X amount of overdoses, and the police became suspicious and raided the property.
So as they say in law enforcement, the property became known to the police, if you will. It became, you got the scarlet letter. Now, here's the implication of some of this. You hear the term pleading out the case. But in a very real situation, that may then, I talk about the scarlet letter, depending on the community, depending on the program, that may then disqualify you for public housing. That may then just disqualify you for future employment. In Rhode Island, we passed something called ban the box, as I understand it. And, the box being you have to that check off on whether or not you were at least, up front before someone even had a chance to meet you, the chance to engage with you, see if you were skilled enough for the job. At least that gave people a shot. In Florida, any of these situations lead to this scarlet letter being put on you so that, again, the spiral continues downward. You're afforded less opportunities, less program, less ways of righting the ship, if you will, so that you get a chance to recover when you get into recovery. I mean, recovery is not just a spiritual moment. Recovery is not just a physical act. Recovery encompasses, if you will, a recognition and an ability to bring your life into sort of the mainstream. Go after employment. Go after
entire life.
Right, exactly.
Financially, everything.
Right.
Financially, housing, everything. All of your needs.
I mean, in your experience, the odds of success at some level of recovery, if in fact you've been branded by the system, how much more difficult does that make even the best of shots, the best of efforts?
I know individuals that can't get jobs simply because they're on probation. I know individuals that can't get jobs because they are not on probation and they just paid fines. Just because people aren't doing background checks anymore, they're just going to the county website and pulling up, and all your information is there, even charges that were dropped, because Florida has the sunshine law. Yeah, the sunshine law.
Right.
So, it makes it terribly difficult. I mean, if you get busted for a prostitution charge, how do they expect you to pay that charge? Because you can't then go turn around and get any kind of job that's going to allow you to live and pay a very large fine. Because it is a very large fine. A girl that I know got a $1,500 fine, and another girl that I know got a $1,000 fine, and it was their first opportunities. And if they didn't have a good lawyer that they could pay for, or that was paid for them, then they would have wound up with 6 months in jail. So, on a first offense, it doesn't allow for any kind of recovery in terms of employment or financial gain. Um, this whole system doesn't allow for any kind of recovery or repentance or anything like that. Once you're branded, you're branded.
Because not only do you have the fines, not only do you potentially have the legal fees, you've got the court costs, the actual ticket, and on again. And then all of a sudden you're faced with, potential garnishing of one's wages if in fact one finds employment. And imagine that magic moment when you go to work. You've just come out of the system. You managed to, just through sheer force of will, manage to remove yourself from this situation, and you go work for, XYZ store. And HR gets a notice that you're under a garnishment by, not by the Department of Revenue, not by, say, child care, but by the court system. And the question obviously comes up, well, what happened? And again, people are for a nation that describes itself as Christian.
It doesn't even matter what happened. It's just, a lot of times it doesn't even matter what happened. It's just, you have a charge, or you have a felony, or you were arrested, and then therein goes the scarlet letter that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yikes. This is so easily preventable. That's the level of human tragedy is astonishing. Now, things aren't tough enough. You guys are gutting it out every day. Life on the streets, trying to rescue. These are people. We often forget that these are people, souls, with families and children and wives. And all of a sudden, word starts to come down about COVID/Corona/ as we call it here, the plague. You've got almost overnight, at least what I'm being told anecdotally across the country, is a shutdown in the adult entertainment industry. You've got a complete shutdown in certain parts of the country in retail. You've got governments all of a sudden under incredible financial pressure. What impact has this had on folks on the street in Florida, and particularly for those folks who were relying in some form of survival sex, or even those folks who were, and I use this very carefully because it appears to me in certain places the world of adult entertainment is separated by caste. As if somehow the folks who are escorts occasionally they'll look down at this person or that person because they're not getting $300 an hour, or they're not this. What impact has this had on your community in the last few weeks?
Well, I mean, like you said, there's a great bit of hierarchy that is involved in that. Individuals that can, but like any other profession or any other set of people in this world, there's individuals that can afford to not work when a crisis happens, and then there's individuals that cannot. And we saw an uptick in individuals that can't afford to miss work. The individuals that I serve in Pinellas and Orange County, we saw an increase on the street-based individuals before anything shut down, and then when they started putting in, the curfews and slowing down the non-essential businesses, we saw an even greater uptick during the day. One thing that's never going to change is people are always going to want to have sex. And there are always going to be people that need to pay their bills. And there will always be individuals that are willing to do whatever they need to do in order to pay their bills. And whether that be, picking up groceries at the grocery store and delivering them to somebody, or door dashing food, or, having sex, there are individuals that still need to pay their bills, regardless of what that job is.
I think of something as elemental or as simple as a Lyft driver, an Uber driver. You're getting into a car every day with, if you're lucky, 10, 20, 30 people of unknown origin that you'll never really meet, you'll never see again, and you have no idea in the current environment if those folks are innocent carriers or maybe not so innocent carriers, or what their true physical condition is. You simply don't know. And there's no opportunity in that real world to sit down and, sterilize your car in between customers. These are folks who are, literally driving for a $5 or $10 fare sometimes. You talk about living on the edge. Now take that one step further, and you're talking about people who've relied on as an income for being involved in intimate relationships, physical relationships with people. And, you're talking about fluid exchange issues. My God, the sheer, it's got to be off the charts for people who are getting sick, who never even knew it was coming. And yet there is no unemployment.
So,
go ahead.
When we started to get warnings, and we started to see things happening over in Italy and China and over on the West Coast here in the U.S., we printed out pamphlets with the information on COVID and everything that was happening, and we've continued to update and print out and hand out that information along with any of the sanitizing supplies that we can get our hands on. Gloves, bandanas, handy wipes, the alcohol pads, and things like that, so that the folks that we were aware of what was going on, and we've implemented safer for now job scheduling, which is really difficult because the individuals that we serve, they crave that closeness that we give them. The occasional hug, the just being close and having a conversation. And with this pandemic, the plague, as you call it, in full swing down here, we can't get close to them. And even though we give them the information, individuals still don't. Some people still don't understand.
Right.
And it's really hard dealing with the, oh, now you don't want to be around me, versus the, no, I just don't want to possibly get you sick or have you possibly get me sick, because there's not enough tests in the state to cover anybody, regardless of whether or not you're showing symptoms.
Right. Now, here's the dreadful irony. There are organizations in places like Rhode Island and Florida. In Rhode Island, I'll use the day one analogy. There's an organization called Polaris, which is literally in a lot of places, I'll just say. And these are organizations that receive federal, state, and local funding and private donations based on them conflating ordinary sex work with trafficking. These folks receive an enormous amount of money, yet provide none of the services, to be blunt, none of the services that a volunteer-based, private donation-based organization like Swap Behind Bars, swapping sex workers outreach project, and in the case of Swap Behind Bars, catering a lot to folks who are and have been incarcerated, and so anecdotally, because I talk to folks in the movement around the country, you've actually got situations where I've heard this twice in the last week, where Polaris has referred clients to organizations like Swap Behind Bars because they don't offer any of the services Swap does. Yet these are folks who receive millions of dollars of federal aid. It's outrageous. They are making a profit on the backs of people who they will not allow to engage or and stereotype and marginalize those folks who are engaging in practices merely, in many cases, for survival. And yet they are being paid richly to support these folks, and they do nothing. I mean, listen, you live this every day. You see the streets. Am I overreacting? Do organizations like that exist in your part of Florida?
Well, I mean, they don't do the same thing that I do, but yeah, they exist. They take a lot of money, they make a lot of noise, they shake hands with politicians and educators and make big buddies and have banquets, but I don't see them doing anything to help people that actually need it. They're not handing out bags of hygienes, they're not operating a needle exchange, they're not giving people condoms, they're not buying people hotel rooms, they're not making sure that people have clothes and shoes on their feet. They're not doing that. That is not happening.
Yeah.
I don't know where that's happening, but it's not happening here. I don't know where there's money, where that money is going, but it's not going to anything useful that I can see.
Well, it's where it's going is into the pockets of these folks who organize it. I mean, I just, it's that's where it's going. These people are profiting egregiously. I through the miracle of the internet, I'm about to pull one up right now. It's there's no oversight whatsoever in what these folks take in, what they spend it on. It's there's no responsibility. Now, I'm a small business, not a big fan of government, but at a certain point, these folks need to display more aggressively exactly what they're doing with the money. Because literally, take the terrible situations before a month ago, and just I don't know, multiply them 1,000 times before what are people, what's happening to people now. I mean, I'm going to give you an example, and this I hope this doesn't make you ill. The head of Day One, which is a anti-trafficking organization here in Rhode Island. All right, I'm just going back to the top sides. On their 2016 federal Form 990, all right, took in program revenue and grants of over $2.4 million. All right, the head of that organization, according to federal tax returns, which are public information in the case of not-for-profits, again, this is a federal Form 990, the head of that organization had a combined income of $170,000 in benefits and salary. $170,000. The second person down made almost $115,000. That's not supposition. That's not speculation. That's not me making it up. That's not conspiracy theory. That's what they make. There's an awful lot of money to be made in helping the poor. And there's an awful lot of money being made in helping folks who, again, find themselves in some form of dependency or in some form of working the streets. Now, do those numbers surprise you? I wonder what your reaction to those numbers is, as someone who literally makes do with pennies every day to help other people.
So there's not a lot of money to be made in helping the poor. There's apparently a lot of money in saying that you're helping them, though.
Bingo. You nailed it.
Because actually doing it, not making that kind of money. Oh my God. I could do so much with that kind of money. We could do so much with just a third of that. We run on a shoestring budget. The $300 passed back between organizations and prayers. That's like what we run on.
Yeah. Literally a hope and a prayer. A few $100 cash
that's
here.
That's their salaries? That's what they're taking home?
They make the Peg Langenhammer, according to, again, Federal Form 990, for 2016, made $157,000 a year. If there's anybody you want me to look up offline, just email me and I'll send you the federal tax returns. You can pass them out in front of their building, because I almost feel like that's the kind of advocacy that needs to happen. I mean,
wow.
I'm all about people making a fair living. But to get rich off of it, to put that in the proper perspective, you can say that after roughly 5 or 6 years of running this organization, she's a millionaire. Holy cow. Think about that for a second. You and I work 5 or 6 places. We make a cool $1 million over 5 or 6 years. And we're all sad. How's that
I mean, that's
for
better
magic?
Wow.
So seriously, the offer's there. I mean, I'll show you how, when we're offline sometime this week, I'll show you how to look this up. And you can kind of scroll through it. We do a dramatic reading once a year on the Coalition is the name of our show. We do a dramatic reading once a year of local charities, and I use the air quote charities, that make, and what the salaries are as a percentage of how much money they bring in. It's ludicrous when you then take a ride through the streets. All right. I worked, just to put it, and I'm not going to equate even remotely my condition with any of the folks who are literally right now trying to figure out how to way to get a meal tomorrow. But, I had a couple kids, put them through college. At one point, I was driving Lyft. Did over 3,000 Lyft drives while we're working a full-time job. I can't tell you how many times I took people who were working at local, CNAs, at local healthcare facilities, were spending $10 or $15 on Lyft to get to a job that paid them $10 or $12 an hour. And again, folks in government be getting rich. And that's so. And because we hadn't met before tonight, I'm not a big government guy, government solution, because what I see constantly is situations like this where government will spend $1 million and the folks on the street will end up seeing $20,000 or $30,000 that, or $50,000 that, by the time the money works through all the different pockets and all the people who get a little piece, a little something. And that's my frustration with the system. I'd rather give you the money.
How do you sleep at night?
Obviously very well. And I'm sorry, it's a bitter laugh. Again, I know we haven't met. It's a bitter laugh. I'm not making light of this. It's just, it's why I do this. Yeah. And why I'm grateful that, in one sense, Alex couldn't make it because A, she's helping somebody, and we got a chance to meet. And I'll have Alex on again, and I'll have you on again. It's the old term was speaking truth to power.
Yes.
People have to radicalize. We do it from different perspectives, but I am immensely radicalized at this point in my life against organizations like this and against situations like this simply because of the humanity. It's confounding. It's absolutely confounding. So What are the needs now? I mean, how bad? And again, I'm not trying to be sensationalize this either. I'm just trying to portray for folks, give them a picture of what it's like. And here's the dark irony. I mean, you don't live that far away from quote unquote the American paradise, the Florida beaches, right? I mean, you're. It's got to be an awful tease. You're not that far from Vacation Land, Mickey, and all the different theme parks, and what I mean. That's part of the state that you live in.
Yeah, it's all Vacation Land. It's God's waiting room.
Yeah, really. But so what are the primary needs now? It's always money. We get that, and we understand that. So what's missing from the picture right now? Are folks in your community getting tested at all? Are they getting health care? Are they having to suffer through this alone? How is the local community responding?
Florida's not testing people unless you have symptoms, or are rich. Right. I don't know anybody that's actually getting testing, but like there's stars and things that say they get testing that have lived here. So okay, so they must be rich enough to afford it. Most people that I know are on lockdown, self-imposed quarantine. Everything that we try and do is contactless. Like everywhere in the U.S., there's no supplies. There's no hand sanitizers. There's no paper towels. Everything is bought out of every store, and one of the things that's making it even worse for the communities that I serve is that places like Starbucks and McDonald's and the gas stations that would typically be open and allow customers inside to use the facilities are no longer open. So individuals don't have proper places to do things like utilize the bathrooms. So it really makes it difficult, even more difficult. And, the counties a couple of the counties have started putting up tent cities and things like that. But Hillsborough's tent city can only house 100 people, and it's only supposed to be set for 30 days. And they spent $120,000 just setting it up. Like, they could literally have given 120 people $1,000 a day for. Like, they would have been set for 30 days. Like, seriously, you can give them just $1,000. They could have gotten a hotel somewhere, pumped it into the economy. Like, but no, let's set them up with tents. That's how Florida is fighting it. They're putting people in tents. Only 100 people, but they're not even. Hillsborough isn't even advertising where the new tent city is. Law enforcement is referring individuals to it.
So you have to pass their muster. You have to be you can't be on the naughty list. You've got to be on the nice list.
The way that it sounds from the different articles that I read, it sounds like law enforcement is referring individuals that are out, the homeless individuals that they run across. But yeah, you can't have felonies or things like that. They don't.
Well,
so care about those people.
So, and again, there's the proof of concept here. We've got an entire system that's geared to put people on a list, and the minute you're on that list, you are denied literally any opportunity for redemption. Literally, yes. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but is that essentially what it comes down to?
Yeah, that's essentially what it comes down to. I mean, you can't
go ahead.
Oversimplify the inability to live. Like, just because it sounds simple, it's not. We all know it's not simple. It's not a simplification.
What about homeless shelters in your area? I mean, it is, the big fear in homeless shelters now, of course, is that they become petri dishes for folks who are ill. You've always had traditional challenges with addiction issues, and you've always had challenges with traditional issues like HIV and how to get those folks who are also homeless into some type of medical situation. Are those people just lost now in the system? Is there any hope for them whatsoever?
So the way the homeless shelters have been working, at least in Pinellas and Hillsborough, they now have armbands and curfews. And, since the statewide lockdown went into effect 2 days ago, I haven't spoken to the person that I know is actually staying in one of the shelters out there. Prior to COVID, the homeless shelters weren't a good place, a safe place to be in most counties in Florida. So now I can only assume that they're even less so.
Mm-hmm.
My personal experience with one of the homeless shelters in Pinellas, I discovered that I was allergic to bed bugs.
Oh, yeah.
They don't. God, that was 4 or 5 years ago, and I can't imagine that now during a crisis they're any better at all.
One of the most marginalized communities within the sex worker community is the trans community.
Yes.
How difficult is it to be out, to be trans, and to be a sex worker right now in your, let's just say, Pinellas County, in that area?
I can't accurately answer that. I'm not a trans person. I can put you in touch with my outreach partner. That is, she's an amazing individual, and she would be able to answer that more honestly. But I would be giving you a cis white person's view of a community that I'm not actively a part of, and I don't want to take away their voice.
No, understood. No, it's fair, and we're going to continue to focus. This is a show we're on a few days a week for folks who are listening for the first time or may not have heard of us before. We're recently we moved into new digs, which allow us, and we're filling out the scheduling, the content, if you will, now. But the fact that we've got 7x24 access to media, to interview people, to bring them online, we're going to be telling more and more stories like this, so that folks understand the challenges people face outside of their comfort zone. I'm grateful for you spending time with me tonight. You're a powerful voice because you're there and you're involved in a community, as opposed to someone sitting on top of them looking down, or you're someone in some far off land making comments as if someone is statistics, not individual people. And I'm grateful for that. We're going to put this out on our podcast and everything else. Folks, if you're looking to donate, there is ample opportunities. It's astonishing how far a little bit amount of money will go to an organization like Swap Behind Bars. You've got the opportunity to give people money that will instantly change lives. Whether
$54 can buy me bulk 150 hygiene item packs that will pack 150 bags with that one item. So like we can make it stretch. We do make it stretch. You're absolutely right.
There you go. You're giving someone an opportunity to feel like a human being for a day or two. Things like testing strips. We've seen it here in Rhode Island. We've seen it around the country. They save lives. They just do. Access to Narcan, access to life-saving devices like that to give people another shot. Infinitesimally small amounts of money relative to what government and what we all spend on it. And these are difficult times. I get that everyone right now is feeling the heat somewhere in their life. But I find that whenever I manage to find a way to give, that the karma it's psychologically and also just there's something about it. I'm old enough, young lady, where the karma used to take about 20 to 30 years to get around to you. Now in the age of the internet, it's pretty much instant. So we all got to be careful about karma. I've found that out the good way and the hard way. But
yes, the internet will get you, and it never forgets.
It really doesn't. Wow. Listen, we've got to go now, but I want to thank you for joining us. I really do. You're a powerful voice, and I hope you use it continually. There's a feeling sometimes when you're challenging authority that it's hopeless, and that when you don't see instant results, it can be very frustrating. It can really. There's days where it just knocks you down. I will tell you though, that the sounds of someone's voice telling a story can change lives that you may never even see. When people hear stories there, even that are out of their communities, very often there's that percentage that is compelled to do something. And your voice lends to that, both in the work that you do every day, and also when you take the opportunity to speak to folks that you might not ever meet. So again, and particularly on the fly like this. Thanks for jumping in for Alex. Like I said, Alex Andrews, we're going to have on again soon. She is actually helping people with a housing situation, I believe, in New York City right now. She's not in New York City; she's far away. But that's what these people do. It's a voice that answers the phone. I fully expect a picture of Alex at some point to appear in the heavens, if you will. Sort of like the bat signal, right? You put a picture of Alex and your group out there, or your logo, and all of a sudden things seem to happen. It's magical. So again, thanks for coming on. God bless you in your journey, and I really hope we get a chance to talk again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. You have a great evening.
All right. God bless. That was Kristen from, and I got the name right. We're going to put up a little information about her later on. She was from Swap Behind Bars, an organization based in Western Florida, but impacting folks in the sex worker community throughout the United States and further away on occasion as well. A little bit of money, swapbehindbars.org, to them goes an awfully long way. 50-something bucks actually gives an entire community a sense of dignity for days. How about that for a return on your investment? We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage born free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at the coalitionradionetwork.com home. In the bunker, buried in the hills of La Prave. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, coalitionradio.us, where this show and other shows will be archived. We're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on the Facebook, we're on the web, we're everywhere. A little bit different of a tale than you're going to hear on the sort of vanilla radio or the vanilla TV that's out there right now, grinding out the same ghastly statistics, playing political battles between Democrats and Republicans as opposed to between human beings, all right, and understanding stories like Kristen's, understanding stories like Alex, understanding communities across the nation that were in terrible straits to begin with and now find themselves facing literally the impossible. I don't simply know how they do it. How do you get up every day knowing that you're facing just an impossible circumstance at this point, while simultaneously putting yourself at risk for your own personal harm? When you've got a family and you've got loved ones and you've got friends and you've got your own situation to consider. I don't know how you do that. But this is our fourth or fifth day, if you will, in operation as a late-night call-in source. We'd love to have you call in at 401-205-3738 if you got something to say about this or literally any other issues. It could be the order from Massachusetts now for curfew. It could be any one of a number of issues surrounding COVID. You want to argue with me about the government's response? Got into it today with somebody on Facebook. I don't usually spend a lot of time doing the back and forth. I had a nice conversation. I don't want to say we got into it, but clearly there's a tendency to put people into one of two buckets. You either must be complete, if you don't agree with the government's approach to COVID and to what's going on, then you must also not believe in the severity of it. Wonderful little graphic we put up on my Facebook page under Pat Ford that showed two circles. And I think this is the real politic of it for most people. I had a tremendous response to this. On one circle, let me scroll down to it. People who believe the virus is very real and very dangerous. And there's another circle overlapping it. People who believe the government is using the virus as an excuse to take our rights. And in that period of overlap, there's the words me. So far, amongst my little realm, I've got a lot of comments. And I got a lot of likes and a lot of loves. Because I think that adequately describes a lot of people. A lot of people. It describes people who understand and believe that this is a real crisis, who understand that there's loss of life in very condensed areas, particularly within the cities. They understand that close or anecdotal contact with people could result in great risk to themselves personally and to the people in their surroundings, and as a result to the people that they may encounter later. They understand that. What they don't understand, though, is why the government changes the story every day. A few weeks ago, this guy Fauci was saying one thing, or whatever his name is. Now he's saying something else. Why some newspapers are talking about things peaking at the middle of this week, while other publications, other adults, other governmental entities are talking about months. So when you start screwing with the numbers and when you start having the story du jour, there is clearly second guessing and cynicism that sets in, because in the absence of consistency, cynicism breeds, discontent breeds, trust evaporates. We've got a government here in Rhode Island which has seemingly not downsized at all, despite the fact they're on the economic precipice. And make increasingly more demands on folks who are trying to figure out how to survive while this is happening. If you've got someone in your family and you've got some money in the bank and say they're still working from home, whether it be an executive, a person in business, or a teacher, you're very fortunate right now. Because a lot of good people have been temporarily laid off. And they're going to have to live on unemployment insurance, which by definition may not cover their cost of doing business. Now, they've got savings, but we're a country where so many people are living on the verge of a nervous breakdown because of increasing costs, increasing tax costs. So for those people, simply shutting it down and staying home, you know, it ain't enough. It ain't that simple. What do you do? How do you cope? You know, it's not life as we understand it from our prior guest. Isn't all cookie cutter. It isn't all black and white. It isn't all peaches and cream. It isn't. Problems aren't neatly solved at the end of a 1 hour syntax. Or I should say a sitcom, not syntax. You know, it's not a measure of who you are. It's what circumstances you find yourself in as a result of events that may be completely beyond your control. And how do you relate to that? So on one hand, as an adult, people are describing a serious illness that you need to that you need to act responsibly about, particularly if you've got family, particularly if you've got children. I can't even imagine what it's like to have small children in a moment like this, much less, say, an infant or a little bitty baby or a toddler. It's life isn't so simple. At the same token, you may be one of those people who are blessed enough to be able to work from home. Or say your business is such that you can work from home. Want to juggle those? One of the great memes I saw today was just a simple statement. It said, Alexa, homeschool my kids. I laughed out loud when I read that. My children are grown, out of college now, thank God. So it's not so simple. It's just not that simple. It's not that simple. Maybe you're one of those folks who was able to engineer the big bucks, like this Langhanger character is. $150,000 making money off the poor. Pretty good work. Pretty good work. Again, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, in the bunker, in the hills of Providence, hidden away where you can't find us. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. And of course, coalitionradio.us. It's an open mic night. We're in our fourth night, if you will, third or fourth night. We've had people call in intimately as they discovered us. A little tricky starting enhancing your business a week or two before the apocalypse. Wasn't the best of timing, yet at the same time, I believe enough in what we deliver here in the coalition, as we have for 7 years now, to understand that if we can take this next step where we've got a talk radio element, we can shake up people, shake up powers, reach out to people in ways that conventional media in the state has failed largely to do. The same old doesn't work. If you're a talk radio host and things don't fit your narrative, how about having a conversation with people about it? As opposed to the tyranny of the mute button. 401-205-3738. Give us a call. We'll talk about anything at this point. You can talk about our guest in the last hour, Kristen, who is doing a remarkable job working with Alex Andrews at Swap Behind Bars. She's working down in the Florida area, a needle exchange program. Let's talk about needle exchange programs for just a second. Best thing ever. Oh my God, you're encouraging drug use. Now, we're simply working with the reality that folks are going to inject drugs intravenously. And if we can do so in a safe way, that gives us the time perhaps to intervene, perhaps to mitigate the damage, perhaps to preserve a human life, so that blood-borne diseases like HIV are no longer part of the calculation. It's remarkably simple once you come to the table with an acknowledgement that we are talking about human beings. Now, here's the irony. I'm not a government guy. I don't think government should be the solution. I don't think government should use its coercive powers to take in, for example, $500,000 or $1 million of people's private property, and then maybe after filtering it through the system, actually spend $25,000 on a program. The reason I'm huge fans of Swap Behind Bars is, again, what they could do with $100, a couple $100, is magic. Absolute magic. What the government can do with a couple $100, piss it away. Throughout all of this is the real world acknowledgement that government is about fiefdoms, government is about power, and government causes as many problems. Causes as many problems as they may accidentally cure. Witness my earlier remarks about needle exchange programs. People were against needle exchange programs because it would, in their minds, encourage folks who are already addicted to a substance to somehow use the substance that they were already addicted to. Not realizing that in the depths of addiction, there are times when folks, as has been explained to me, would do literally anything to get the quote-unquote, and I'm using the 1970s terminology here, a fix. It boggles the mind. So what happens in situations like that, people were using dirty needles. Again, for folks who are hypodermically injecting drugs. And it's almost predictable. At that point in time, HIV, it still is a scourge. It will always be a scourge, but was sweeping the planet. And as a result, yikes, people got AIDS, HIV. But we sure showed them Damn it, we weren't going to give them any of those needles. That'd be the commie thing to do. So yeah, we can't be doing that. If we do that, there'll be hellfire and Sodom and Gomorrah. So whatever we do, don't give in to those depraved types. Yeah, don't be helping people. It's God's will. So that's the universe we live in right now. Folks are judgmental, often concerned about the sanctity of life before that life enters the real world. And then to hell with them. It's absolute hell with them. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born, free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com. 401-205-3738. If I keep talking like this for days, I might actually get relatively good at it. Who knows? I could start to sound like a real radio personality. Folks, if you're interested in sponsoring community radio, we'd love to have you take a look at Coalition Radio. We survive. We have guests on like Kristen in the last hour who survive. We survive, I should say, on donate. Hey, we got a caller. Holy shnikes. Is this
Haley?
Hey, Haley, thanks for calling in. You are calling in the first week of our operation as a talk radio station.
I saw your radio show. Fabulous. How are you?
Good. We just had on a guest, Kristen. She's with Swap Behind Bars, which is the sex workers outreach project. She was calling in from the Tampa area, and we had a long conversation about reality and a subject that's near and dear to your heart. So the reality of support organizations, privately funded support organizations, who are working on the streets with people in danger. We talked about some of the challenges before COVID, before Corona, and what just the terrible situations folks are facing right now as a result of this, simply because of the challenges in funding folks who are in harm reduction. And I know that you are an expert, if you will. You work, you tell folks, and because I always mess up the name of the pack. tell folks.
I know. It's a tough name.
Tell folks who you work with.
I am co-chair of the Substance Use Policy Education and Recovery PAC, aka the Super PAC. It's a really long name. I get that. Yeah. So we do evidence-based drug policy, basically, but we do other things as well. We've had to kind of shift gears and pivot, adapt to this COVID crisis as best as we can, because we had bills in the pipeline. Obviously, there's probably not going to be any legislative session this year, so we're trying to make the best of it. Do what we can.
Speak to, if you will, from your and this is to say that life under COVID is new and yet at the same time rapidly evolving. If you're in recovery and you haven't been able to get a bed, or you haven't been able to be part of a program, and you're trying your best to if you will, and no, as you know, this is a judgment-free zone, but if you're trying to move beyond those issues in your life, how challenging is it right now? How difficult are the streets right now?
I can't really speak to like what it's like for recovery. I mean, I work with people, so I'm a drug and alcohol counselor by day. I will say that some of the concerns, to be honest with you, so if you've got a person that would normally go into detox, right, to, let's spend 5 days in a hospital to detox from alcohol or benzodiazepine or like any other substance. People are a lot more hesitant to do that now with being exposed to all other people, with social distancing. So that's been kind of a challenge. You're asking people basically if they're looking to get into a treatment or get into a bed. A lot of people in recovery housing are living with 10, 20 people. And I know a lot of these houses are on lockdown. They're not allowed to have family visitors. They're not allowing people in or out, which means that they're not allowing for intake. It depends entirely on the circumstance, but it's challenging. Yeah.
How about the legal environment here in the state? I know that you guys were gearing up on a number of initiatives right before. There were a couple circumstances that you guys had found, and as I do, I mean, full disclosure, I support your work entirely. I'm a homer. I'm a big fan.
Thank you,
what you guys do. Because again,
I know we appreciate that.
Well, it's you again. There's a lot of folks who will spend an inordinate amount of time talking about it. There are a lot of folks who will spend an inordinate amount of time on social media talking about it. Some of them in direct opposition to. We're talking about basic humanity here, and then there are a handful of folks, and I mean a handful. And you guys have developed a very impressive support network, both within the legal, the judicial. And even you've managed to carve out space because of the professionalism of your approach and the law enforcement community, which is a challenge. And you've got to work double time to develop those relationships. But what is the current state, if you will, of things that you're working on, and whatever frustrations you might have right now about things that have happened?
So. We had a few bills in the pipeline. One was our baby, which is defelonized simple drug possession charges in the state of Rhode Island. We've been working in conjunction with a couple of government offices who have been extremely supportive. Our General Assembly is very receptive to these bills. Unfortunately, we've still got law enforcement barriers. Pat, it's been a whirlwind few weeks, because what's happened in the last few weeks is that we've got police chiefs that are saying that they're only basically responding to calls and that they're not taking out the bad guys for petty crimes, which is exactly what we've been after for the last couple of years.
Right.
So crimes such as trespassing, where there's no victim, open containers, public urination, possession of simple drug possession. These are victimless crimes. So we've been working on them in the General Assembly, and we've had a lot of pushback from law enforcement. And suddenly you've got an environment where, police know that they can't, there's also a lot of movement to keep people out of our ACI. Mm-hmm. So you arrest people on certain crimes, third strikes or whatever, and it puts people in danger. It puts the general population of the prison in danger. It puts people who are about to get released in danger. It puts correctional officers in danger. Correctional officers coming in from the outside put the general population in danger. So it's really kind of shifted kind of the scope of what we're all working on. And it's been interesting. My actual hopes for this are that once this crisis subsides, that it will become kind of the new norm. That we'll realize, like, the sky didn't fall when we didn't arrest people for doing things that don't really hurt other people. Wow. But in the meantime, we're just kind of spinning our wheels. Yeah, we're kind of just spinning our wheels. We had these bills in the General Assembly. We were lobbying them, and then, like everything else in everybody else's lives, it just stopped. And that's a tough pill to swallow.
Well, let me jump in on this in a second, because there's overlap here. If you're just joining us, Haley, of course, is from the... can I call it the Intervention Super PAC? Or could I?
You can call it the Super PAC. That's fine.
All right.
Yeah.
So there are. I'm old enough. I'm older than you are, a lot. To see some of the fascinating side effects. You and I, and I, I wouldn't call you political per se, but because of the issues you work on, you become politically involved. Okay, without picking sides or anything. obviously I'm on one side.
Sure.
I'm a libertarian for folks who might be dialing this around the country. Talking about some of the issues that all of a sudden don't seem that important. As a libertarian, we've always been big on professional licensing, that, we need to reduce that at certain levels because it will encourage economic entrepreneurial activity, particularly in areas that might be marginalized financially, but also to provide easier access for folks who travel across state lines. We've always complained about things called certificate of needs. And if you're not in the hospital world, that's where hospitals have to go out and basically go through this extra legal process to apply for additional facilities. And that's impacted both your world, Haley, per se. And I say that professionally because you work in it professionally, but your world and my world, because, there have been many situations where for-profit private hospitals or even not-for-profit hospitals have looked to expand bed space, have looked to do this or looked to do that at their own institutional risk. Mm-hmm. And they've been prevented, from the certificate of needs. We both look to law enforcement to walk away from and I'll use the term alleged criminality. And what I mean by that, and you and I will agree on the term pipeline to prison issues, where you take civil infractions and either through mischaracterization call them crimes, or civil infractions whose civil penalties eventually become weaponized in the form of, let's just say, bench warrants, extra fines, all of that. And none of this does anything but putting people, breaking up people's families, breaking up lives, ruining lives, smoking some.
And I call it the setup to fail, Pat. I call it the setup to fail. So a lot of states don't have warrants for nonviolent arrests. So if you accrue a certain amount of debt, they're not going to put a bench warrant out for you. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people in Rhode Island are netted up in the criminal justice system. And currently, it still happens.
And the notion, for example, that the failure to pay civil fines with the state of Rhode Island could ultimately result, and this is a hot issue for you and I, ultimately results in, say, the loss of one's driving privileges. And as a libertarian, I use those two words together with clenched teeth, all right? That then, because of the economic need in a state like Rhode Island where mass transportation is not good, my opinion, then you force people into criminality by driving knowingly or sometimes unknowingly on a suspended license. Then they're subject to arrest.
Sure.
And then
Pat, there's currently 110,000 unique cases in Rhode Island for driving with a suspended license, which has been decriminalized. And a lot of people, when they actually get pulled over and were arrested for that, didn't realize that was even an arrested charge. They've scaled it back, but out of 110,000 people, so that's 1 in 10 people in Rhode Island, right? Mm-hmm. Those are unique cases. So there's over 200,000 people in Rhode Island, 200,000 cases in Rhode Island of people who are walking around with those on their records. It's wild. It's absolutely mind-blowing. 110,000 people in Rhode Island that have that on their records, and there's no auto expungement. And we're working on that. We're working on that also in conjunction with other offices. In other states, they've actually expedited it where they just swipe it. We've got a couple of different policy pieces that need to go through the legislator to fix that, but there's no legislative session. So we're eyeballing all these things, these set up to fail kind of quote-unquote crimes that are really just they're getting people into a lot of trouble for no good reason. And we've acknowledged these things as a society. They're not even criminal acts, but we continue to criminalize them, or they haunt people, right?
Forever. For effing ever. They really do. It's the scarlet letter effect. And again, like so many of these, you get into the most extreme examples where it can affect your ability to get public housing, and it can affect your credit. It can affect literally one mistake in today's Rhode Island society can put you down to can just grind you down because, particularly now, you've got people who are not going to qualify for unemployment because I've met now, it's what's happening is the truth and the fiction are starting to separate. I'm running into people who didn't make enough last year to qualify for unemployment. Think about that for just a moment. They paid, their employers paid into the system, and yet if they didn't make enough money, or they took a break, it could have been for illness, it could have been for school, it could have been for anything, all of a sudden they're not worthy of unemployment, even though they worked and put into the system. Does that mean they should make as much as other people whose employers put a lot? No, but there should be some acknowledgement as part of this required contribution. These people should be afforded something because now they've got nothing. And where's that going to put us? I can't.
In the hole.
We if there was some avant-garde filmmaker is going to film a modern day of Les Mis, they don't need to go far. Come on down to Rhode Island. we'll introduce you to Leo. And now it may not be stealing a loaf of bread that gets you in the sauce, but we got lots of other opportunities.
Or you might be stealing a loaf of bread. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, in my household, we're blessed. We've got someone who's working. I'm unemployed right now, doing this. But
are you?
Yeah, no, I got
the car dealership closed.
Yeah, they've been told to close.
That.
No, they've been told to close. I mean, they're.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The service departments. No, it's okay. The service department's still open, but they legally couldn't maintain sales. I sell. For anyone who doesn't know, I sell my day job. I sell big honking commercial trucks. Well, I used to up until a couple weeks ago, and and my employer wants me back, but he can't legally be open. I can't force him into a position. I mean, they're very successful, but they're a family-owned business, and it's amazing in a situation like this how quickly you as a business can hemorrhage cash by paying for people that aren't working for you. So I can't, to be intellectually honest as a libertarian, I can't expect him to cover me when he's not. They kept us there literally for a week and a half. We were sitting there kind of staring at the wall, and when the government said, you can't open anymore, they carried us. God bless them.
Right.
I work for a wonderful family who raises millions of dollars a year for charity. Part of the proceeds of the dealership they run goes towards helping children in Boston at risk. They've
which dealership is this? So I know if I ever decide to drive again.
Oh, it's right across the street from the stadium.
I'm definitely afraid to drive.
It's right across the street from the stadium, or Odman's. This is a company who set up a private charity. In 20 years, has raised over $120 million with an M.
That's wild.
For children. If you're going to go to the stadium, back when the sports reopened, you're going to get ripped off for parking. I always joke, go to Rodman Ford where you're going to get ripped off for parking, but every single penny goes to their children's charity. They pay for the security staff out of the normal dealership. They've got, so there's stories of hope and redemption exist everywhere. It's just how do we get that to become the mainstream in our jurisdiction?
And I think we're going to get there. I hope I'm trying to see it right now. I'm really trying to see it right now with everything, like just with everything, with people who are in this time. And I know this is going to sound corny, but people who are complete strangers that are offering to pick up groceries for people, or prescriptions for people, or make masks for people, or like help tutor their kids, or do whatever they can. Like I see bright spots everywhere. I do think that this pandemic is going to change people, and just kind of the way that we look at each other. And I've seen it bring out the worst people too. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not entirely a silver lining person, but I've also seen a lot of really good things come out of people during this time. So I'm just hoping it's more reflective in our Providence Police Department, which they're failing in epic proportions right now. So sorry, I know we're on.
No, that's okay. What you just take a sip of water here. It's one of the interesting parts about this is that I'm doing this 5 nights a week now, 3 hours a night, and it's
Really?
and we're going to try and go even longer because I think there's a space to fill in Rhode Island for independent media. There's already some wonderful independent media. The Uprise RI, Steve Alquist does an amazing job. There's a few other people out there really working it hard. Citizen journalists, Citizen News.
Uprise, you said?
Yeah, Uprise RI.
Steve Alquist?
Yeah, he's amazing.
He's the best. Yep.
He's there.
Yes.
There are times when I've gone to governmental hearings in a state with a $10 billion budget, when the only person recording it is Steve Alquist.
Isn't that wild?
I
believe this though. I actually, he's on point. He's got it. He caught. He catches a lot of stuff. People don't understand the gravity of the work that person does.
Yep.
And like between the stuff out in Burrville and the chiropractor and this and that all came from Uprise. And it's completely commendable. Absolutely commendable. He actually does research. I know firsthand when he covers our events. Portuguese drug czar that came to our State House library, and he covers it thoroughly, like objectively. And there's no bias. I know he might be selective on what he covers, but the way that he covers it is brilliant. And I trust him. He's a great journalist.
Yeah, no, I saw Steve for the first time in a couple of months because I'd seen him at some State House hearings in passing, and you kind of wave as you're both going in the direction. Was at Bella Robinson's event over at the Dark Lady when she was working with sex workers and in effect celebrating the Sex Workers Day, and Steve was there.
Yep.
And it's interesting because I come from a political background that should be antithetical to Steve Alquist completely, and you know what I made a little speech that night, and he
maybe, but maybe not. I see honestly, I draw some parallels between the Libertarian Party and the progressive movement. I see it, and I work in it. So,
well, and to his credit, he covered my speech as well as everybody else's speech, and he's actually said some very nice things, and we chatted during it, and again, you're right. There's absolute. My mantra is to find the areas that we agree on, work on those first, and then we can get all pissed off at each other later.
Yep.
Right? there's plenty of time down the road to hate each other, get mad and get frustrated and whatever. But let's, when it comes, the things that matter are, number one, the areas that you folks cover. It is critical.
Yeah, and that's honestly, and that's what makes us a nonpartisan PAC, because everybody's affected. Right. We work with substance use disorder, mental health issues, and that's a nonpartisan issue. So people are impacted all across the board, whether they be Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, Dems, progressives, libertarians. It affects everybody. So we've kind of had a pass this whole entire way through where we don't have to play the political game. So I work in the State House most days when they're in session, and I lobby our bills, and I do this and that, and everything that we're working on, people can relate to in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. And that's been, it's almost touching to hear the stories from people in the community, people in the General Assembly. Everybody's been hit by this in some way.
Right.
And that's what makes my job very easy. I don't have to play the political game because everybody is affected. Right. And that's it's tough to hear some of the stories, but at the same time, people can relate to what we're trying to do.
No, absolutely. And the first time you and I met, one of the conversations we had was, we looked at acceptance with folks in the LGBTQA community, and we realized we were both sharing anecdotes, and the realization was kind of the epiphany was that that folks accepted the LGBT community because all of a sudden it wasn't, and I've always told you, the minute someone identifies a community and they begin with then you realize that you're talking to someone who is either uneducated or intentionally ignorant, because it's not the gays, it's a group of people. And once folks realize that it was their cousin, their brother, their sister, the guy they played softball with or there's someone they went, and my kids life, one of their first Sunday school teachers was in a same-sex committed relationship.
Yep.
And she was an amazing Sunday school teacher, something that I love to rub in certain people's faces all the time. She's the best Sunday school teacher we ever had. And so it's the same thing that's finally happening with folks who have recovery and addiction issues. And all of a sudden, it's not some, and I won't even use the words, it's not some guy or gal out there on the street. It's somebody's brother and somebody's sister, and maybe it's even you. And so that's when you wake up to the fact that these are very human conditions and need to be addressed in some shape or form by the community. Now, again, you can get into the weeds as to how to do it, but the first step towards is recognition of the problem and recognition of the causes. And I think we finally, as a community in Rhode Island, have moved past that, and now it's just getting around to continue to retune how we approach folks. I just listen in certain. God bless that we have you guys. I just got off the phone with someone who is a, if you will, a street support worker who doesn't have any funding and cannot get fentanyl test strips. All right, cannot get them.
Yeah, they're expensive. They're $1 a piece, and that's been kind of the thing for the last 2 years is that they're very expensive. And about fentanyl test strips, I'm going to be honest with you. If you're using them for heroin, there's no such thing as heroin nowadays. So I work in an intensive outpatient program. I'm a person in recovery from heroin use, and I'm a former IV drug user, right? About heroin, there's no point in testing for fentanyl because it's all fentanyl. There's no such thing as heroin anymore, right? Where the fentanyl test strips come in, I think personally, is with cocaine. So you've got people who are using cocaine. Large percentage of that has fentanyl in it as well. And those people aren't, they don't have the tolerance for that substance. So that's where those strips come in. Also, the fake press pills are where we're seeing like a large majority of overdoses coming through. So they can look exactly like a Perk 30, a Xanax, or whatever, but they're laced with fentanyl or carfentanil. And I'm not sure if your listeners know what carfentanil is, but it's especially scary. So you've got heroin or morphine, and then you've got fentanyl, which is like 50 to 100 times the potency of morphine, and then you've got carfentanil, which is 50 to 100 times the potency of fentanyl. And we're seeing carfentanil in our drug supply. This was like a substance that is actually designed to sedate elephants when they're going through surgery, like full-size elephants. And that's what's going on our street right now. So you've got these fentanyl test strips, and they're $1 a piece. And they're really, really good for people who are using cocaine, who do not want this in their drug supply, for people who are testing their pills, although I'm not sure if they're going to ground up their whole entire pill and find out. But it's scary out there. We're losing people. We're losing people. The strips are important. They should be available. And they shouldn't be marketed at the cost that they are. They should not be marketed. It's like an SA product that is like quadruple the cost of what it should be on the street. So, yeah.
From a
consumer perspective, Pat, like everybody should be entitled to know what they're putting in their body. Just is they know how many calories are in a bag of chips or like a can of soda or whatever's in there. From a consumer perspective, people should know exactly what they're putting in their body. Always. And those strips should be available.
In your mind, in your professional opinion, is there not enough competition to make them, or are there outside forces that are maintaining this high price?
No, they're made. They're made by a BTMX company in Canada, and they're reliable. But like I said, it's the drug supply has changed since we legalized the fentanyl test strips 2 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So in other countries that are a little bit more progressive, they actually sell drugs that are pure. And this is a radical concept. And if you want to talk on like harm reduction, they'll sell heroin, where a person can buy heroin And like you're looking at like the Netherlands, and they can use heroin without any sort of other substances in it.
Well,
So you can buy exactly
right.
Right.
Well, that's why I believe in complete drug legalization, because that's the only way that you can hopefully eradicate people who are doctoring and lacing drugs. That's the only way, that by creating a stable, professionally manufactured product, that's the only way you can keep people safe. I mean, the notion that this is going to go away, just because of sheer will, or it must be people who are weak who are using it. I mean, folks, it's 2020. This is no longer the French Connection. This is no longer 1978 or 75. I mean, it's time to grow the F up and realize that for any one of 1,000 reasons, there are going to be people involved with this, some of whom may choose to continue to be involved, some of whom desperately want to not be involved. And having a black market illicit supply leads to violence, it leads to impure product, and people die because of that. There's no justice involved in someone dying because some government body decided they were going to make one product that you could self-medicate with legal and another one not legal. It's just that's nonsense.
Right.
So
one of the bills that's going through, or it was in the works this past session, which I think is probably over at this point, was for committee to pilot a safer consumption facility. Have you heard about this?
No.
Safe injection facilities.
Well, I've heard. In fact, one of the things I want to ask you about is needle exchange. But please, that's exactly what I'd like to talk about. Go ahead.
We have needle exchanges here currently in Providence, and they're up and running, and they're thriving well. And this is a radical concept, but it's gotten a lot of traction. And they have a facility that is, I believe, up and going in Philadelphia. So safer consumption facilities are places where a person can bring their illicit substances and inject or inhale in front of some sort of medical person. So it's under medical guise. So these are things that happen in other countries. Canada has a bunch of them. There's hundreds of them in the whole entire world. And these consumption facilities supervise millions of injections a year. Mm-hmm. And not one death has occurred in one of these places. So, like it or not, we have an actual bill going through our General Assembly. It actually passed unanimously in the Senate last year to establish a pilot program for a safer consumption facility, which would have opened up one place under the guise of the Department of Health. And it actually passed the Senate. And the House leadership has really been keen on this. So you've got Representative Sarkachi, Representative Edwards, Representative O'Brien. These people have expressed that they want to get on a plane and go and see one of these places for themselves up in Canada, up in Toronto, I believe. So that bill has gotten a lot of traction. We expect that we expected that it probably would have passed this year. Mm-hmm. Obviously, things have changed, but we're hopeful for next year. So you set up these places, and a person can just use their drugs that they come in with, and they don't pass away. So if there is an incident such as an overdose or some sort of adverse effect, there's medical personnel on site to help them. And they found, I think it's like 37% of people statistically, and I might be wrong on that one, find recovery in these places because there's a segue to clinicians and people to kind of talk them through their stuff. So rather than people just using out in the open or passing away privately, we've got, a model that's empirically kind of based that works. So that's something to definitely watch for next year when we get stuff back up and running again. I'm excited about it.
Do you think, and I know this is controversial, so I'm just going to separate your opinion from any of the controversy around the issue. Should the legislature be meeting be meeting electronically?
I'm not sure. I fantasize about snaking my bills through electronically, where the police chiefs can't can't combat them. I don't know. I don't know enough about this stuff. I would say probably no, because I believe in like the democratic process, people being able to show up and advocate for themselves. I know a lot of people don't have access to these electronic things. I know electronically when the bills come through the pipeline and they get announced on a Friday, it goes by a lot of people. So I'm going to say no, but I don't know. I know they've got to get their budget done, and yeah.
No, I hear you.
I really don't know enough to weigh in on it, like, to be honest with you. But I'm sad about the fact that we're not going to be able to do any reform this year. But it's in the grand scheme of things, like when this crisis starts to peak in the next couple of weeks in Rhode Island, and we start losing a lot more people, I think, you've got to kind of, it's got to be humbling, and just, that's what we're living with right now. So yeah, I think they've probably got to pass their budget this year. I don't know how they're going to do that, but I wish them luck. There's some good people up there. We've got great relationships with the General Assembly. They care. I don't know.
Well, I hope, our little coalition effort is continuing to grow here. I hope you will. We've got a great remote facility. We've got a great remote setup. I can actually, on a night when we plan it, I could actually bring a couple of you on video, bring you right in,
Sure.
overlay statistics. And the beauty of it, none of this has to happen in person, given the new reality. But at the same time, you and I can have a 45-minute conversation about these issues, or y'all can talk amongst yourselves about these issues and have a real analysis and a real conversation, as opposed to 3-minute sound bites and, judgmental rantings and all of that. I mean, it allows folks to actually develop, if you will, an argument for people to make their own judgments on, minus the usual nonsense that's so part of our news structure here in Rhode Island. It's Springsteen wrote a song, and somehow I've got to remember what the title was, but what it meant was basically 300 channels and nothing's on. And what we're trying to do here is to do nothing less than change the face of media here in the state of Rhode Island. And that's to say, we're going to be up 24/7 to figure out a way in the age of, social distancing. It's a little challenging. Because there's only, believe it or not, there's even so many only hours I can talk, even though it may seem, based on your experience with me, I can talk forever.
Right, you can talk.
But, I just want to...
I mean that in the best way.
The best way possible. But I want to extend that invitation, because it would make me so happy if in some small way we can put the conversation and the argument out to people who might not have a chance to either listen, view, come to understand it. If we could do anything on that level, it would make this type of effort worthwhile. And the technology that exists now that didn't exist a year ago is amazing, because I got to tell you, there isn't much I can't do here in terms of competing with regular news stations or regular talk radio. There just ain't. So listen, consider it a home. You don't have to ever come here at this point. We're safe. I'm alone here in the bunker, and I can reach out to the world and get folks like you on who are subject matter experts.
Sounds like you're in like an undisclosed location or something.
It's me and Dick Cheney here hanging out. All right.
Really? How's he doing?
Yeah, he's doing good. Target practice happens daily. When you're in an 800 square foot room and there's one or two of you all day long, you get a little loopy. So I'm on top of everything else, I'm incredibly grateful that you took the time to call tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, listen, we're going to have the podcast out on this. So in the next day or so, hey, if you could, as a favor, just spread the word that there's somebody new in town. We're covering issues that a lot of the conventional stations don't want to. Well, at this point, it seems like all anyone wants to do anymore is point fingers at each other. That's not our game here.
Yeah.
We got enough of that. Don't we?
I get that. That
Cool.
doesn't help. I hear you.
Cool. All right, buddy.
Thank you, Pat.
Hey, thanks. Hey,
Bye, everybody.
Haley from the Super PAC.
Bye, Pat.
Have a good night. Say hi to everyone for me, okay?
Good night.
Good night.
See you later.
Bye. Oh, that was wonderful. You know, I've been blessed. I've gotten to know a lot of activists across Rhode Island, a variety of issues. I hope to get Steve Alquist in here this week via the miracle of IP addresses to discuss some of the things that are important to him. It's good stuff. Those folks work, they just in a couple of short years of their existence, they have literally changed the face of recovery here in Rhode Island, nothing less. When you can have that kind of impact, that's a life well worth lived. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free. Yep, outrage porn free. Yeah, we're outrage porn free. Civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here in the studios of thecoalitionradionetwork.com. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, coalitionradio.us, the mothership, where lots of stuff can be found. Lots of stuff. We've got a civil liberty blog, a running stream, if you will, of press releases from a variety of civil liberty organizations. Prominently, of course, the Rhode Island chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, Stephen Brown, executive director. Their group does astonishing work with regard to the protection of your civil liberties at a time in our nation's history when, boy, do we need them. Boy, do we absolutely need them. The focus there, of course, my remarks in terms of civil liberties. Again, I've been being debated on that ceaselessly because these are special times. The government must be granted liberties. The government must have power over all. Because it's a government. Well, to that I say, of course, balderdash. But you knew that. The notion that government has some penultimate power, omnipotent power, is nonsense. The Constitution of these United States, and by the way, I consider myself to be a post-constitutionalist. That's a fancy way of saying I believe my rights actually trump the Constitution. But the Constitution is an awfully nice piece of paper. Helps you in lawsuits. The Constitution and our powers, the executive power, the limitation on powers and the powers of the state were created just for situations like this. I actually heard someone on the radio use, well, here's these technicalities within the Constitution. The problem is too much of the media is too stupid on constitutional issues, for lack of a better term, to really understand. They're swept along with the emotions of what's going on. Here in Rhode Island, you've got suddenly newfound, and I use the air quotes, if you will, access to the governor's office. That's absolute nonsense. We've got a governor in Rhode Island who decided to stop holding press conferences. Oh, she holds them. She stands up there in front of a lectern, and she's handed questions, selected questions. And our media is willing to accept that. I'm not. They're willing to accept that as appropriate. Balderdash. Absolute nonsense. When is the media going to grow a set in this state? Or are they too busy reveling in the fact that they got birthday greetings from the governor? Hint, hint. I for the life of me, we've got more media per capita in the state than just about any place in the country, and I mean that. We've got all 4 major networks. We've got a newspaper of record. We've got 3, well, 2.5, significant radio stations. And the only people bitching and moaning about that are the independent media types like myself. So, balderdash on that. Pre-selected questions, because they're using this crisis as a foil to keep people away from government. Imagine. There certainly exists in this state the facilities. God knows we've got a lot of facilities. God knows we have a lot of buildings. Put them in the damn convention center or the dunk. So you could set up 10 seats 50 yards apart with a microphone and ask the governor questions from there. And then have the SAC to demand follow-up questions. It's embarrassing. I think I'll post that. Social media can be therapy for me. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. Area code 401-205-3738. We've only got a few minutes left. Of course, I'd like to thank our guest, Kristen, earlier tonight. And then Haley from the Intervention Super PAC joining us later. We try to share their information whenever they send it to us because they do a wonderful, wonderful job. It's 11:29 here. We're going to take about a 5-second break because my voice is killing me. Let's reach out. According to this, someone somewhere is watching. There are a few people showing up on a variety of feeds. We appreciate you taking the time to do that. Either that or you're using us as a sleep aid, playing us in the background where the dulcet voids of Velvet Fire on the Coalition Radio would gradually do what no series of sleep aids could do, which is knock you right the hell out. Yikes. 401-205-3738. Give us a call. You could talk about anything. You want to talk about the Grateful Dead? We can talk about that. You want to talk about Springsteen? We can talk about that. You want to talk about what you're watching? We can talk about that. That's the kind of stuff that real talk radio hosts are supposed to throw out there. What do you spend an entire hour talking about? What are you watching today? What's keeping you busy? What's your favorite show that you're binging on? Oof. I guess I'm supposed to do more of that stuff. Make people feel good, make people feel connected. I guess having people on back-to-back to talk about needle exchange programs is not someone's light idea of conversation. Sorry. Guilty. Absolutely guilty. Area code 401-205-3738. The big Coalition Radio. What's keeping you up very late at night? Rhode Island's newest talk radio solution. All the other guys have gone to bed by now. Right now is when they play the canned syndicated programs. What we're hoping to do is give you a little nighttime love. So while this is going on, if you don't want to talk about sports, the endless, yet another retelling, if you will, of the Patriots draft choice. And my God, are you over the Tom Brady thing yet? He left. Deal with it. And the exhaustive analysis of everybody who's played an NFL quarterback who's under the age of 30 and still 40, still lives in the United States. Are they the next hope? Are they the next hope? Although, of course, you got to give the Patsies bank for what happened this week. Scoring face masks out of China, that's pretty good. Having a plane lying around and letting it go in that kind of trip. Bob Kraft laying down that kind of skidall. That kind of donations, that kind of juice. Holy cow. Holy cow. That's impressive. Shut me right up. Well, Didn't have to do that. Probably one of the most compelling moments of the night was informing our new friend from the Tampa area, Pinellas County, Florida, that there were people making $150,000 to $170,000 a year helping the poor, helping the disenfranchised. How does that make you feel? Is that something do you believe as I do that people should be fairly paid, but at the same time, if in fact you're working for a charity, that isn't your excuse to make bank? Is that something that speaks to you? Let me know. Jeff Medeiros, he was on about an hour ago. We replied to him. He replied on the Facebook page, how do we donate? I'll let you know, Jeff. Thank you for asking. That's a great question. As soon as the Facebook kind of calms down, I'll say go to, you want to donate, www. Don't you hate when people do that? swapbehindbars.org. You for listening. Or watching. Or both. Don't be a stranger. So it's about 11:30 at night on the East Coast. In the libertarian world, lots of things happening this weekend as we gear up for our presidential election. It's interesting in the light of this how quiet national election news has gone in terms of the national elections. But in the background of all this, is the prospect of a national election in November. Will that happen? And in what manner will it happen? Inquiring minds want to know. Is, in fact, a Governor Cuomo ascendancy in the Democratic Party a reaction to what's seen widely as a weak Joe Biden campaign? And how will that be received, if you will? How can that be received on terms of the Bernie Sanders people who've been working for 7 or 8 years to get their guy into a position where they feel he can win the presidency, and have gotten screwed and abused by every aspect of the professional end of the Democratic Party imaginable? They've done everything they can to make sure that they don't elect that guy or put him in a position where he could get elected. Holy schmolies. Yes, I just said that on the live air. Reading through the social media, here's one post. Watch Dr. Fauci in January say you don't need to worry about coronavirus. Oops. Sorry about that. That's what I was alluding to earlier in the show when I was talking about conversations I was having with people. My distrust of the government comes from not because there are medical experts out there pointing, I believe accurately, to the severity of this, that's my opinion, but to the fact that the government keeps tossing around different expectations with people in order to play politics. That's the problem I have. That's why I don't trust the government. That's why I can believe simultaneously that the threat is real and that the government's be screwing with us. I reserve that right. Nothing you're going to do is going to convince me otherwise. Well, I shouldn't say that. Unlike some of my brethren in the political world, there are people out there right now who spend all day scanning the media, social media, whatever, to find something to be mad about who support Donald Trump. For the life of me, I don't understand it. If somebody says something negative about the president, they are on it like white on rice. They can't help themselves, simultaneously working feverishly to find some social media troll or some alleged blog that's going to support their presence. And it doesn't matter. They do not believe that there's a truth. Hey, we got a call. Let's use on the line. Hey, this is Pat on the Coalition Radio Network. Who's this?
Hey, Pat, this is Spike Cohen. How are you doing?
Spike Cohen, vice presidential candidate, running for the nomination for vice president of these United States in the Libertarian Party. Thanks for calling in to America's newest talk radio program. Yes, I am on the line.
Absolutely.
15 hours a week plus, as long as the voice can hold out, trying to bring truth, if you will, to the masses, with a focus on libertarian politics. How are things going, buddy? How you feeling? How are things doing?
Things are going well. We're part of the worldwide lockdown of the entire world, and we're awaiting the end of the zombie apocalypse like everyone else. But no, we're doing good. We are stuck in the house. We're in full campaign mode. It's been a very interesting shift from traveling state to state for all these different conventions and doing some online stuff to basically doing everything online. I attended the Libertarian Party of North Carolina convention which was actually just a giant Zoom call yesterday morning. So that was very interesting. So yeah, it's just been a very interesting shift to do everything online. So it's been fun.
I heard Susan, the chair of the LNC, the LLNC or the LNC, did a fabulous job under trying. I mean, that's
she did.
If you're running a political convention on Zoom, you're in for a long day. And if you
it was definitely, she did a terrific job. And considering, so imagine anyone who's listening who's ever been to, I guess, any political convention, but really anything involving a lot of libertarians, it is like, they say it's like herding cats.
Right.
It's actually more like herding butterflies that are on LSD. And so now if each of those butterflies on LSD are also signed into their Zoom account on their phone or their computer, and you're trying to, help them figure out how to use it, and people keep unmuting their mics. And so you hear, what they've got going on in the TV in the background. She did a terrific job, all things considered. It was about, I think it was just under 100 people total that were on the call. And, yeah. So no, she did an absolutely fantastic job. I would have quit about 8 minutes in, if I had to run that or anything like it. So, I've done AMAs before that had tons of people in them on Zoom. But nothing where there was actual input where anyone could talk at any point. And she did an absolutely great job, and I did not envy her at all during the entire thing.
Well, one of the things we'd like to announce is that we're contemplating in the very near future having a vice presidential candidate debate here on the coalition, given our new sophisticated state-of-the-art in the bunker, high-roofed, hardwood floor, brick wall exposed a studio here. Now, my understanding is that means we're going to have you on, right?
Well, I would hope so. I would hope any Libertarian Party vice presidential debate would at least feature me briefly. I would hope so. So yeah, no, I look forward to that. That'll be awesome.
Well, you have actually kept the field swept clean, I think. It would appear to me, and I could be wrong, but that your sheer political presence, your force of will, your character, your wit, your repartee has left the field. I think people, quite frankly, are just too afraid to run against you. That's what I think.
That is a theory. That is a theory I've heard. It's funny because when I got into the race, I thought, and I'm great friends with John Phillips Jr., who was running as Kim Ruff, vice presidential running mate, and I love him. So when I got in, I'm like, oh, great. So I'll get to do debates with John, and we'll get to hang out at the conventions, blah, blah, blah. And then they dropped out. And I thought, oh, wow. And it was I think about almost a month to the day that they dropped out. And they jokingly said, oh, we dropped out when Spike was in because we couldn't compare to him. And I thought, yeah, that's not funny. Don't keep saying that because people are going to think it's true. And then, so I mean, there are some other presidential candidates: Craig Bowden, Jeff Wood, Zoltan. I can't pronounce his last name. Just announced that he's not a Republican anymore, and he's going to run for the Libertarian vice presidential slot. So there are other people running. John McAfee briefly announced he was running for vice president, and then he shifted back to president. We offered him the role of president of vice in the Supreme Cohen administration, and so we'll see if he takes that. But no, I've been surprised that more people didn't jump in. But you're not the first person to say that it's just my sheer force of will that has kept people out, which I find hilarious because this is my first time doing anything like this. so it's been fun to watch.
By the way, one of the most compelling interviews I've ever done from my own personal perspective was John McAfee in 2016. I mentioned, this is all, this is recorded. We're going down the list of issues, and we talked about, well, how do you feel about the decriminalization of sex work? And he answered something effective. I got to dig out the tape. It's worth it. Something effective when he started talking about how his wife's former pimp was out to murder him. That's when I realized that we wasn't in Kansas anymore. That was, and understand at the time we were on very conventional, very AM, very big, very corporate AM radio. And we were not on the internet. And that's when I realized that day and one other that station management never listened to my show because I never, because we went into some detail and I never heard a word from him again about that. So
they
that
just trusted you. They just trusted.
No.
They assumed everything was fine on your show. They say, "What's going on with Pat's show?" Oh no, I'm sure he's got it. He's got everything covered.
Oh yeah.
No, I had John on my show, My Fellow Americans, on back in November, I think, end of November, beginning of December of last year, and it was around the time that he was talking about. He had talked about. From recreational activities with whales, sexual activities with whales, on Twitter. And so I made the huge mistake of bringing that up briefly, and he went into some serious detail about why that would actually probably kill most men, but not him. That I realized that I wish I hadn't brought it up, and but then that's all anyone wanted to ask me about. And all the people commenting, that's all they wanted to ask was more questions about whale sex. And I thought, I actually had him on to talk about crypto and his presidential run, but it became a very whale sex heavy program that day.
You were number one with the whale community with a bullet. Listen,
apparently not. No.
Indie media lives for the unexpected. I've dedicated probably a couple 100 hours of programming towards the decriminalization of sex work. And obviously, as part of that, we've had shows focusing on, if you will, the abuse of the law enforcement community. People are often shocked to find out that in many jurisdictions, it's actually legal to engage in a sex act with a sex worker as an officer of the law, as a court officer, right? And use that, because we all have that kind of fake thing on TV. The minute, they're not allowed to actually do anything, not so fast. And so I had two folks who we named activists in the sex worker community, long time, serious players, great people, and also funny as hell. And, I have an elderly father. He's 97 now. He's probably about 94 at the time. And unbeknownst to me, that he decided to say, hey, let's listen to Pat's show I've never listened to before, was the focus on the law enforcement sexual abuse of sex workers. So the two folks involved, again, wonderful people, just talk about doing the work of the Lord on the streets. These people are phenomenal. But they were working themselves into a frenzy. 20 years of frustration was coming out on the radio. And there was the immortal moment when one of them said to each other, because they were talking about physical abuse of sex workers by police and going through actual court cases. Very professional, but you could tell they were just working themselves up. And one of them finally said the immortal words, well, all the police want us to do, and by the way, this is on Indie Media, all the police want us to do is for us to suck their cocks anyway. Now, this is on same AM radio station. Now, if you've ever seen in the movies, when everything slows down, my producer, who was a good 20 or 30 yards away, and not used to any drama. I mean, the only time we'd ever had drama on the show before that was when they inadvertently loaded for the bump music, the live concert clip of Rage Against the Machine, as opposed to the studio one. That was big drama at the time. We got calls.
Okay.
We got calls on that. Old Tom there, he can cuss, but he looks at me. He's 30 yards away. We make eye contact, and then it's when he's diving for the mute button, and he didn't make it. That was the night of the
too late. Yeah, it's too late at that point. Right.
And all my father could say to me when I finally saw him, "Hey, Dad, I heard you listen to the show. Which one?" And he said, and he goes, "Wow, that was a very interesting show." I mean, how can you shock? Yeah, how can you shock a 94-year-old guy, right?
Well, that'll do it. I mean, that's the fun of live programming. I had my 2 shows on Tuesday and Wednesday nights, and on Wednesday nights I have a guest, and we've been pretty good with stuff. Plus, it is internet, so they can pretty much say what they want. But yeah, John and a couple others have definitely made me rethink what I'm doing, whether I want to continue having guests on, and not at least maybe prepping them a little about what can and can't get us, knocked off of all social media. So no, it's been very interesting. That thing you were saying with the sex workers, I knew that to be true a few years ago, and I was talking to someone about it, and I said, so they use the prostitutes and they do whatever they want with them, and then they arrest them for it, but the cops don't get in trouble. And they were like, "Oh, you're crazy. That's just libertarian nonsense. That's not true." I said, "Go look it up." I said, in many states,
yep.
And it might be even most states, the police are actually allowed to do that. And I'm thinking, I wonder who wrote that rule. You couldn't have a similar situation where if someone hired a cop as a hitman, the cop isn't going to go and kill the person and then arrest them for it. Or drugs. I mean, you think of all these other situations, and it's like, the cop's not actually going to do it. But with a prostitute, now suddenly it's okay for the cop to do it.
Right.
And it just goes to show, like, if they really thought that sex work was such a threat to the public morality and public health, they wouldn't let the cops do it. Like, it's truly just about some stupid. Enforcement of morality, or in some places that allow it, but you have to get a license. It's about revenue collection. It has nothing to do with public safety or public health or public decency or morality or anything else. It's just about enforcing some stupid law and creating a black market for it.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's there are people who call it a victimless crime. Well, I'll agree there is no victim, but there is also no crime. So consensual activity between the 2 adults for commercial purposes where the body is used predominantly as a significant part of the act, I think they call that football. I mean, the notion that we would and here's, as as a libertarian, that every time government gets involved in some type of prohibition, that ultimately that's when the bad actors come in. That's when violence increases. That's when public safety is impacted, the safety of the individuals participating, the safety of the individuals around them. It's so predictable that there are those of us who are considered allies. I guess I was told recently that I was an ally because you have, in the sex worker rights movement, you've got folks like myself who spend a lot of time in it and sit outside of it to provide commentary. Right. It's the notion that we're actually conflating that with a crime is ridiculous. It just makes no sense. So whenever you have this prohibition mentality, as I was starting to say, you incorporate all these evils in it. So we've actually begun to call it the war on sex, because there was a war on drugs, and there was a war on fill in the blank, and there was the war on alcohol. Now there's the war on sex, and they're using some of the same business models, as I say, to fight it type of public. I had earlier today a young woman from an organization called Swap Behind Bars, Sex Worker Outreach Project, and it's an incredible organization. I commend it to your attention. It's really very, very libertarian in the sense that they raise private money to go out and support men and women and trans who are incarcerated or from having been incarcerated or in high-risk situations, and they find ways to encourage harm reduction. And they raise a lot of money privately. And, now because of federal regulation, if they do it via email or they do it in electronic form, that can be a violation of FOSTA and SESTA. If they, they don't raise nearly enough money to pay themselves. But I read for this young woman, and we're talking about a woman who was not that far removed from the streets in the sense of being homeless. Is trying to, in a sense, create some sort of economic safety for herself. Working diligently at it while at the same time essentially volunteering her services on the street to support people at risk. And so I read to them the federal Form 990 of a not-for-profit here in Rhode Island that engages in support services, except they don't do anything. It's one of these government-created, mandated / not-for-profits, $5 million of revenue a year. And they don't provide any housing. They don't provide any alternative resources for the women. But they provide support and referrals. And the chairman of said organization pays herself the princely sum, and this is according to the federal tax returns for not-for-profits, by the way, folks, are public data, pays herself almost $170,000 a year.
Wow.
Pretty good money helping the poor, huh?
It's nice work helping the poor is apparently nice work if you can get it. I mean,
170,000.
That is insane. You hear about these charities that have these inflated CEO salary and compensation numbers. I know someone that used to work for World Vision, and they said that because they were a nonprofit and they couldn't give out profits. Instead, what they would do is their surplus money, they would, during Christmas time, everyone was getting, diamond earrings and diamond watches and stuff like that. And it's like, well, it's not profit. This is all, part of our operating expenses. And I'm thinking, the people that are, giving, they have an auto draft for, $50 a month or $20 a month or whatever, or they're giving big lump sums whenever they can. And thinking about these, poor, mosquito infested communities that have people in them that are starving. I don't think they thought that, that some guy, some person working in, Toledo or San Diego or Toronto working a call center got a diamond wristwatch out of your money. But it's terrible how people think of sex workers. I've always been someone who thought that it should be legal. But I will admit, up until the last 2-3 years, I had kind of a negative concept of sex workers. And in talking to them, and in talking to their, advocates for them, I realized that, first of all, it was very hypocritical of me to feel that way when sex is often a very transactional thing to begin with. I mean, you think of all the times that, you're courting someone, you're not. Courting is a strong word. You're trying to get someone in bed, and so you're feeding them drinks, and you're giving them the nice great meals on really nice dates, and you're taking them on on these really elaborate dates and spending all this money, and that's okay. If you give them a really great experience, or if you promise to help out, pay a bill or something like that. But it's never explicitly in exchange for the sex, and yet the sex wouldn't be happening if you didn't do that. And you wouldn't be doing that if there wasn't sex involved. But as long as you're not just straight up giving them money with the explicit understanding that it's in exchange for the sex, that's perfectly legal. That happens every single day. Well, right now it's not happening as often because everyone's stuck at home, but it happens a lot. Like in normal conditions, it's happening billions of times a day. And yet, if you switch it up and say, okay, well, I will just give you this money in exchange for sex. But we're not going to record it and call it pornography. We're just going to do this between us. Then it's suddenly illegal, and it's just like it's absurd. It's a very arbitrary moral judgment that's being made and being enforced on others. And if you consider the morality of it, I would say it's immoral to take 2 or more consenting adults and put them in cages and put criminal records on them where it's hard for them to get a good job or get ahead in life, because they did a type of consensual activity or transaction that harmed no one else that I just didn't like. I think that's immoral.
Right. No, I obviously, as a fellow, one of the tribe, I agree with you 100%. So we only got a couple minutes left. Before we go down on the at the midnight hour, we haven't figured out a way to play the national anthem when we shut down yet, but we will. Just to aggravate some of our libertarian friends, right?
Yeah, end on a high note. Yeah.
All right, and afterwards we'll all do the Pledge of Allegiance. But a couple of questions for you. First of all, the concept behind this show is not only to have guests on, but to have a legitimate talk show experience where people, call in and just do what they do on talk radio shows with a lot of libertarian-centric programming, as well as we do a lot of community programming here in Providence that we're looking to move over to this model. So what are your thoughts about that? Because I don't see a lot of that out on the net. There's a lot of, traditional Zoom style where people will teleconference in, but this is, you listen to us on your appliance, you hear something that pisses you off, you just ring up 401-205-3738. We are the coalition, loud and proud. Call us now. The lines are open. That kind of environment. And number two, what your thoughts are on I'm actually going to put the challenge out to have a libertarian vice presidential debate here, because I think y'all deserve that. So what are your thoughts about those two things? In fact, I may even reach out. This is on the fly. I may put Mr. Fishman on the spot because he seems to be evolved into quite the moderator. I've seen him in a number of times in a number of formats. We can do it remotely here because we do have the next time you're on, I'll bring you on screen in a more of a conventional guest format, and we can have people call in with questions too. Are you up for that?
Yeah. So to answer the format of having calls and all of that stuff, I think it's a great idea. I've tried doing the call-in thing on my show, but because I didn't have a screening system of any kind, it was a lot. It was a lot of me just trying to figure out who was calling and telling multiple people who were trying to call in at the same time to wait to their turn, because I was just using like a phone number on Hangout. So I really don't do that much anymore because I didn't really have the hardware and software to be doing it in a proper way. But I think it's a great idea. I mean, there are plenty of times I'm watching these things and I'd like to just call in and speak my mind on it. So I think that's a great idea. In terms of the doing a debate, I've been waiting to do a debate. I'm actually shocked that I announced back in December and it's now April and I haven't done a debate. The only debate I did was when Vermin had to tap me into a presidential debate at the last minute because his computer wasn't working. It had apparently broken on this flight back home. And so I had to fill in on Vermin's behalf. But that wasn't a VP debate. I was just tapped in with some libertarians and some transhumanists and a Republican and a Democrat. And I've been looking forward to a debate. I've been wanting to do a debate. I think there's a lot of things that need to be said and questions that need to be asked. And I've been doing a lot of town halls and forums and stuff like that. But I look forward to doing a debate. I'd love to do it.
All right, so I think we're going to tentatively ask people what we've been thinking about, and we'll obviously talk offline with the candidates. Is a Saturday night, probably
sure.
two Saturday nights from now, next, in observance of the Christian Easter holy day. I think it probably wouldn't be appropriate to do it next. I'll make sure that we don't conflict with anybody else's traditions, but I'd love to do it a week from Saturday in prime time. I'll reach out to you, and I'll put the challenge out on the most important place of all, the Facebook, right? So that if folks are running,
that would be great.
I mean, Zoltan, it's interesting. I haven't met him. I think I've chatted with him online once or twice. He's a transhumanist. Interesting cat. Yeah. He ran. I think he was involved in one of the statewide races in California in the last cycle. He's a guy with a perspective. Mr. Bowden's interested. Actually, we're not going to do pay to play here. I'm not a big fan of that. We're just going to ask folks if they simply want to spend an hour on a Saturday night or an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how the candidates feel. And I'm going to reach. I'm going to put Mr. Fishman on the spot because I think he does do a wonderful job of. He's independent. He asks hard questions. He I've seen him in everything from a state, local, relatively small, with 50, 75 people. I've seen him in online, and he has interesting, provocative questions. He He hits you with the mainstream stuff, but he'll throw a couple curveballs in there that'll be meaningful. And let's get things revved up. Regardless of what happens with the convention, we are going to, as a party, elect a slate of people to run for national offices. And the challenges. You see, one final question. I'm going to throw this at you. I personally feel that given what's going on, we as a party not only are not. We're faced with all the challenges a third party is faced with, ballot access. Although we've got a real opportunity that Mr. Fishman and Chairman Sarwak are running, which is to force states into an acceptance, which could be life-changing, that it's unfair to ask people to do balloting, to do signatures in the midst of what the states themselves are promoting as a shutdown, constitutional right-defying pandemic. So how could that work?
Right.
All of a sudden,
right, exactly.
All of a sudden, amidst this terrible tragedy, on a political level, there is a tiny silver lining in it. And for the folks, I wish libertarians would be more damn positive, because quite frankly, as someone who's been in the movement for about 10 years, not one of these long-term folks, but in the movement for about 10 years, I think we've got a wonderful crop of candidates who started out this process. Some of them have now stepped aside, but we've got a wonderful group of people running both at the state, municipal, and national level. It's just some astonishingly talented people who are working their butts off. So I take offense at all the people who say we don't have many choices. And
we also have a terrific opportunity this time around because of these lockdowns. Republicans and Democrats can't fill stadiums and concert halls with a bunch of, AstroTurf people that they're paying to show up. So when Joe Biden talks right now, he's not talking with, 300 campaign staffers and paid AstroTurf people behind him. When Donald Trump's talking, he's not talking with, the back end of the stadium behind him. They're just in front of a webcam or in front of a camera, just like us. And
Yep.
Their production values are garbage because they don't know how to do this. They haven't been doing it this way. If you watch one of the episodes of my show, it looks better than any Joe Biden online rally or any Trump online rally, because they're figuring out how to use Zoom like the rest of the country. And it doesn't look good. So there's a great equalizer that's happened here, and a great opportunity for us to show that, this mysteria that they've, created around themselves, that, that they're this, this sort of air of inevitability and popularity is all gone. It's just them in front of a camera looking like a moron. And we do the whole in front of a camera better than they do, because that's why we've been doing it all along. So I think that's a terrific opportunity. If the LP and groups like Open the Ballot are successful in getting this thing, at least in this cycle, if not forever, this whole petitioning requirement removed, or allowing the petitioning to be done online, one or the other, that will be an incredible victory, not just for this, but future election cycles. So as terrible, undeniably terrible as this pandemic is, and as horrific as a poorly centrally planned,
Right.
A state requirement that everyone stay inside is, which ultimately was the only reason we're even facing this is because the federal government barred testing for COVID for the first month and a half of the outbreak. So it allowed it to spread, pretty much as much as it wanted without any kind of real containment. But because of all of that, because of their failures, they've actually handed us in my mind, a pretty good opportunity for us to show that, no, they're not inevitable. They're not, there is no magisterium there. They're just people like us, and they suck. They're people that suck and we don't like. And I think it's an incredible opportunity for us to be able to be on much more equal footing than they usually allow.
You're absolutely right. Ultimately, when Orange Cheeto or Crazy Uncle Joe looks soulfully
Right.
into the camera, they can exist and be successful solely on the quality of their ideas. Well, the quality of their ideas sucks. And listen, I talk about the three horsemen of the apocalypse. In other words, what government did to us, in addition to the absence of any testing whatsoever, what they did in the years leading up to this, which have exacerbated. I believe this. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I believe that this terrible tragedy occurred organically, as statistics are. It was wont to do, and it happens. and it happens
Right,
sometimes every 100
right,
years,
right.
50 years, 20 years, whatever. But ultimately, the presence of certificate of needs and extra legal, extra governmental rules put in place to prevent the free market from using risk capital to engage in expanding their medical business contributed to this. The inability of states to use license, to use licensing as a barrier to entry, the ability of that, I should say, has prevented an environment where people could effortlessly move to wherever and whenever their medical talents were called for. The ability of the FDA to create extra legal processes and a near impossibility of getting drugs approved created an environment where innovation couldn't take place. And the very notion that the first effing thing the government did, all right, in order to respond to this crisis was to remove a lot of those barriers proves proof of concept that we are right. That simple, folks.
Yep.
That's simple.
Yeah, everyone is a libertarian during a pandemic. And think for a second, Pat, about why they even did all that in the first place. Why they put all those barriers to entry and all of those regulatory hurdles and things to drive down supply and drive up costs. They did it in a cynical ploy to make healthcare so unaffordable that we would all just kind of throw up our hands and say, okay, fine, put the government in charge of it, Medicare for all, single payer, whatever you want to call it, just give it to us. So literally people are going to die, not just because of their immediate failures, but like you said, the things that they've been doing for years, for decades, that they did solely to get more power. We don't know how many tens or hundreds of thousands or even millions of Americans, and not to mention all the people, worldwide that are going to die. Specific in America, the number of tens or hundreds of thousands or even millions of Americans that are going to die just because government screwed up the healthcare sector intentionally to get more control of it. And that's maddening. And that's a message that's going to be a lot easier for us to say while people are watching it in real time.
Right. I tell you, there's opportunities for us here to do the right thing, which is use our intellectual honesty and the power of our ideas to help. Maybe you and I, our political movement cannot prevent organically driven medical catastrophes. In fact, if nothing else, one of the great conceits of government is that somehow they can tax an idea into existence, when at the same time it's clear they can't control an organic situation like this. But what our ideas can do is foster an environment of innovation where, who knows, if we make medical practices more humane, more accessible, then perhaps we could have anticipated this, or we had the opportunity to anticipate using the vast technological capacities this country has in terms of supercomputing to perhaps pre-work these situations. So ultimately, the key is let's harness our skills, our talent, our innovation as a society, and let's do it by using the same type of self-ownership, body autonomy, personal freedom that we advocate for in everything we do. It works. All right? This is the time of the libertarian ascension. And that's why folks like you and I, what I enjoy about talking to you is that you take things into your own hands and you simply do them. We need more people to get their asses off their damn computers. All right. Stop arguing with each other about what arcane method of voting that we're going to use in a hypothetical convention that may or may not ever exist, and simply use this opportunity, use the time off. All right. To work it. I saw a meme today, which I wish I grabbed, which was, if you haven't, we're faced with this time off, and I'm blessed in a sense. I mean, my employer-driven unemployment fund, I'm unemployed right now. I work in a building that drives most of its sales through interface with the public. I work for a wonderful group of people who kept us employed despite the slowdown in the run-up until at the point in time when the governor of Massachusetts said, you're not legally allowed to be open. I work for good people. And the hope is that I'll work for them again. But in the meantime, if you haven't used this time off, if you're not in a precarious situation, if you find yourself with a home and some sort of income and you don't have the immediate gun to your head, if you haven't used this time to grow, whether it be, as one guy pointed out, your side hustle, your side job, that educationally teach yourself something, do something with this time, then we've wasted a priceless opportunity. The only good things that can come out of tragedy like this are what can happen when we harness our own personal energies at a time like this to try and do something good. It's that simple.
Yep, absolutely.
So as libertarians,
absolutely, and that's what I.
Go ahead, bud.
No. I was just going to say that's once I knew that I wasn't going to have to go anywhere for the next few weeks or months. My entire focus has been on creating more content, and because my shows and my campaign have been more outside of libertarianism. So I don't need to convert libertarians. Libertarians know that we're right. We already know that we're right, and we already know that if we don't get more people to realize we're right, we're just going to keep losing. Like, we come solidly in third. We've got third nailed at this point. Like, no one's challenging us for third, and that's fine. That's I mean, there are people that are fighting for fourth. So I mean, we're getting there. But the thing is, we're never going to come in second, much less win on a state or national level. Which, keep in mind, the Libertarian Party, 49 years, has not won a single statewide or federal election. It's not just president and vice president. We've never won a congressional election. We've never won a Senate election. We've never won a gubernatorial election. And we've won a fairly scant number of state positions, like, state senators, state congressmen, state representatives, and things like that. Most of our victories have been nonpartisan races, like citywide and countywide races, local races, and stuff like that. And that's, if we're going to get to the next point of being able to move the cultural needle and actually win some elections too, we got to bring more people into this. And the way that you bring more people into this is by sharing that idea. And it's great for us to, sharpen, iron sharpening iron between each other in our different, talks and conventions and everything else. But if I would remember, I'd leave my house and either drive or fly to a convention where I would pass thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people on my way to a convention room where I would be going to talk to dozens or maybe hundreds of libertarians who are already 100% sold on what we believe. And then once we'd all leave we'd all try our best not to make eye contact with the public in the lobby that often outnumbered us 3 or 4 to 1 just in the lobby of the building we were in. And if we don't start thinking in terms of reaching all of the other 99 point whatever percent of people who aren't registered libertarians, and the vast majority of whom have never even heard of libertarianism, or if they have heard of it, they've heard a terrible shit take of what libertarianism is from either someone that didn't like libertarianism or a libertarian who has no business talking about libertarianism. If we don't start turning them into libertarians, or at least getting them agreeable with our ideas, we're never going to move out of third place. And so that's what I've been working on since I started this campaign, and I've been doubled down on it ever since I've been freed of any obligations of having to leave my house for the foreseeable future. And that's what we need to do. That's what this campaign has been about. That's what what Muddied Waters and our programs have been about. The entire thing has been built on the fact that it's great that we all agree with each other. But if we don't start pulling in some serious numbers of people, even if they don't agree with us 100%, if they at least get the concept behind what we believe, and we can slowly pull them in with the idea that we own ourselves, we own our bodies, we own our lives, we own our labor, we own our property, and no one should be able to take those things from us, even if they call themselves government. If we don't get people sold on that idea, which they innately know to be true, but they don't intellectually connect with, if we don't get that done, we're always going to be in third place. And maybe one day a smaller party might surpass us, and that will always be in fourth place. If we don't start doing that, we're going to remain in stasis at best. And so that's what I've been working on, and that's what my campaign and my advocacy has been about. Whether I get the VP nomination or not, it's what I'm going to continue doing from here on out. What I've been doing for the past few years, and I invite people to join me in doing this.
It's interesting, great minds in the case of yours and relatively feeble minds in the case of mine sometimes come up with the same ideas. This past Friday, Dan Fishman, who had set up something called LPTV, which he's kind of gradually rolling out, Libertarian Party Television, we had the pilot episode, if you will, and we called it An Hour with the Candidates. And it was Mr. Welty from the great state of Washington and Mr. Rainwater from the libertarian hotbed, if you will, of Indiana. Both great candidates. And they each spoke for about 35 minutes. And I asked them questions. And they knew this going in. I actually phrased it. I said, I'm not going to be asking you about Mary Rothbard. I'm not going to be discussing Mises or Austrian economics. I'm going to ask you about questions about issues impacting your state. And you as a local candidate, I'm going to ask you to focus on those issues, all right, to have a conversation about the Indiana manufacturing base. How does Gary, Indiana succeed in the case where you've got an Indianapolis-centric state government in Indiana? On the case of Mr. Welty, who did both of them did amazing jobs. Mr. Welty is running for insurance commissioner. All right, what percentage of the state's
Washington?
Right. What
Washington State, right?
Right, exactly. What portion of the state's gross product is or shall we say household income is spent on insurance? Okay, take a case where you're running for insurance commissioner. I mean, you can, when people mention that the first time, you can feel on the other side of the mic people's eyes collectively rolling in the back of their heads until you mention to them, right, that, oh, by the way,
what that role is.
Right. This is the guy in charge of your car, your health insurance, your life insurance. All right, how much do you spend that on a year? All right, and what kind of role can this guy play in actually implementing libertarian ideas and ideals into a lunch pail issue for anyone who lives in the great state of Washington? And then you realize the power of a well-run campaign. Mr. Welty has been running as I grew to know. I'd heard his name, I heard great things about him, but he's been running for more than a year. All right, literally, and you talk about opportunistic. He's running against a guy who's been mailing it in, and he actually, before the travel ban hit, prescient. Talk about prescient. Talk about just intuitive. Talk about, because I don't believe in luck. All right. Talk about somebody who just figured out the right thing. He spent most of the time, a significant part time, outside of what's called King County. And King County, of course, we know from the Seattle Seahawks, the guys who didn't hand it off at the last minute and then lost in the single greatest choke job in Super Bowl history, which I had to bring up. Sorry, went for the cheap shot. But at least I didn't lead off with, well, how is Washington doing? Have they recovered yet from 2 years ago when you blew the Super Bowl? No, I didn't do that. So, I mean, but he knew the answers. He was on it. The guy's on his A game. Because the other point of this show is to bring people, to get people to understand that if you're a libertarian in Maryland, you have a solid interest in how Anthony Welty does in Washington. And if you're a New Mexico libertarian, it's important to you how Mr. Rainwater does in Indiana, and vice versa, as they say, as the Stooges would say. It's meaningful. It's important that they get into the debates that they've worked so hard for. It's important that they get a little bit of extra money, a couple bucks thrown to them from other parts of the state. If not only just because any one of these guys needs the money, but also what that means to each of the candidates, the psychological lift it gets. I know we had a couple candidates here in Rhode Island. When they got checks from California, it was like, wow, it matters what I'm doing. It matters. People know.
Right.
They touched something in that candidate. So we're going to do this every week. We're going to focus on non-presidential offices, but we're going to focus on people running for governor and people running for water boards and commissioners and state house and state reps and things like that. And it'll give them an opportunity to place to speak. Sometimes it might be the first time they're interviewed. Both of these guys were kind of beyond that. That's one of the reasons why we picked them out first. But, for some of these guys, it'll be the first time they've been interviewed. And that'll mean something.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and it needs to happen because, like you said, we can talk about Rothbard or, von Mises or the Austrian business cycle or, any other, obscure libertarian things that we believe are important. And ultimately, the Austrian business cycle is important. It's a great way to understand why the economy is doing what it's doing right now. But most people don't care about that. And if you lead off with that, they turn off immediately because they already think you're weird to begin with because you're not a Republican or a Democrat. They've been conditioned to believe anyone outside of the Republicrats are, a waste of time anyway. And if you just start talking obscure inside baseball stuff, they're going to shut down. And if anything, their cognitive defenses are going to go up. They're going to think you're attacking them, especially if you call them a bootlicker. And, ultimately the best thing we can do is listen to what they have to say, what they care about, and then reflect back on them to show them that we actually care about those things and that we care about, because that's another thing. I wouldn't recommend you run for office if you actually don't care about anyone. So if you find yourself not caring about anyone, just go ahead and don't do it, because then you're probably just doing it for all the wrong reasons anyway. But if you do care about people, demonstrate to them that you care about them by listening to them, hearing what they have to say, explaining, showing them, demonstrating that you care about them and what they just told you, and then explain how libertarian ideals work within that, why the government has failed them, either by creating the problems that they're concerned about or making them worse. And then explaining how libertarianism, not just the Libertarian Party, but the libertarian ideals of non-aggression and self-ownership and voluntarism over coercion, why those things work. Because if you do it that way, what they hear is, this person cares about me, this person actually listened to what I had to say, and this person presented some compelling ideas that completely challenge everything that I've heard before and actually intuitively make sense to me. And that at least starts the conversation. Whether you win that election or not, you at least have started the conversation with people.
Right.
And that's what the goal is. I mean, I'm running for vice president. I'm not going to tell you what the Vegas odds are that the Libertarian Party candidate is going to make it to president or vice president. What I'm going to say is that if we ever hope to win in this cycle or any other, or if in the meantime we hope to move that cultural needle at all, we need to get on debate stages. We need to get in front of media. We need to get in front of people. And the best way to do that right now, at least, is through nonlinear messaging, hitting people with humor, hitting people with things that force the media to pay attention to us. And then when we get that attention, turn it around on them. Instead of showing up the way they want us to and playing their game, playing Charlie to their Lucy with the football for the 49th year in a row, which is however many presidential election cycles, 12 election cycles that during that time, doing that yet again, showing up and making them look like the joke, speaking directly to the audience about their fears and their anxieties, and showing them how the clowns running this circus right now are never going to give them the solutions that they need. And that's what the campaign's been about.
What was, to my mind, the greatest single political banner of all time was during the Bill Clinton campaign, and they had the sign in the Bill Clinton war room, "It's the economy, stupid." And yeah. There's got to be a sign wherever we meet virtually, which essentially reflects now, quite frankly, again, here's where worlds changed overnight. If you had told me 4 weeks ago that the economy wasn't going to be the single biggest issue of this election, assuming, of course, that we have resolution sometime late spring, early summer, it will be all about the economy. And it will be all about what the government did right or wrong about COVID. We are uniquely positioned to provide legitimate solutions. So, and I talk about proof of concept. The proof of concept exists in the fact that Republicans and Democrats ultimately unwound everything they did and followed our game plan for the last 2 or 3 weeks. They temporarily will award them temporary libertarian status. Congratulations, Sparky, you're a libertarian.
Right. Right.
So and we need. It's up to us, every individual in the party, every individual in the movement, regardless of whether you're radical, whether you're Mises, whether you're audacious, whether you believe in top unity, bottom unity, rentist theft, whatever. I'm just asking people for the next month or 2 or 3 or 4, get over it. Just leave it at the door. Just.
I mean, look at the gift that they have given us. Republicans and Democrats just passed what is effectively, once you factor in the Federal Reserve spending, they have done something like $6 or $7 trillion of deficit spending, of stimulus spending. Mm-hmm. If you do the math on that, that would be enough money to give every single American on earth, not just every household or every voter or every taxpayer, every American of any age, old people, young people, newborns, people in prison, something like $17,000 or $18,000 each. Look what they did instead. They gave a ton of money to big banks and Wall Street, which did almost nothing to prop up the stock market. And they gave each of us one check for $1,200. And then they stuck us with that bill of roughly $17,000 per person with interest over, because it's all going to be dumped into treasury bonds. So we'll be paying the interest on that for 30 years or 40 years or whatever a T-bond is.
Right.
That's what they did to us instead. They gave us, at a time when they told us all to stay home because they screwed up and allowed a pandemic to completely run amok, and where they have no control over it. They don't even have any idea how many people even have it. They told us all to stay home. So most of us, or a good number of us, can't work, or we're on reduced hours. And then they gave us $1,200 and a bill for $17,000. They have given anyone who wants to run against Republicans and Democrats, and they did it as a bipartisan. They immediately all came together to just screw us as hard as they could at our most vulnerable, scared time. They gave us such a huge gift. And if we instead, want to sit there and argue with people on the internet and call them bootlickers, instead of looking at this incredible opportunity that they've given us, then we don't deserve to win. So I hope that the messaging, whatever candidate they pick, whichever ticket they run on, whichever people they nominate in all the various positions, our messaging needs to be: look what the Republicans did to you. Look at what government did to you. Here is why that happened, and here is why we would have never done that to you. And here is what we would have done, and here's the philosophy behind why we would have done it that way. It's an incredible, incredible opportunity, and I hope we take it.
No, I think we will, and I think we're good for it, and I think it's just going to require all of us to assume leadership levels. We can't look to other people anymore. We can't assume someone else is going to do it anymore. We've got to all we've got to, every one of us has got to step it up. And that's the part that's going to be tough, because we've got a lot of folks who are sideline warriors. And, I'm guilty of that myself at times. I think we all are. So I'm not going to put myself in any exalted position. We've got to all step it up. And but you know what? I think we could do it. I'm still optimistic. Put party, all right, already working on that diligently. Let them do their thing to present us with a group of ideas that we can follow up on, and then let's get to work. So,
yep, absolutely. The convention's going to happen. The people in charge, we can definitely have conversations about how that should best be done. The convention's going to happen in one way or another. We're going to have nominees, and we need to be unified in our messaging. And that's what I'm pushing forward. I'm helping down ballot races. Anthony's someone that I've been helping and supporting on my page and through our social media, and many others as well. We need to come together, not just because we're the same party, but because we are unified around the same ideas. And I think I'm optimistic, but I'm also a genuinely just normally optimistic person, which is rare in this party. Mm-hmm. But I do think that I know that we have incredible potential in this cycle, especially with all the unprecedented stuff going on right now. And I'm confident that we're gonna take it and be able to leverage it in ways that our opponents don't even expect right now.
Spike Cohen, he's running for the nomination of the Libertarian Party, America's third largest political party, for the vice presidency of these United States. Spike, give us where folks can find you and Vermin's campaign, and how they can contribute, how they can volunteer, engage, as we like to say here at the Coalition, in shameless self-promotion.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite things to do. So thank you. So you can reach us on verminsupreme2020.com. If you want to contact us or donate or, become a member of the team, that's where you would start. On social media, if you look for either Vermin Supreme or Spike Cohen, you will find us on Facebook. You will find us on YouTube. You will find us on Twitter, on Instagram. My personal program is Muddied Waters Media. You can also find that everywhere on social media, as well as muddiedwatersmedia.com. And a real easy plug, since it is now officially Monday on the East Coast, later on today, on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, Vermin and I will be taking part in basically a student town hall with Emerson University in Boston, Massachusetts. And that will be streamed live on our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, and YouTube. So tomorrow at 6, you'll be able to tune in and watch us talk with the kids, which is one of our favorite things to do, is talking with college students. So so be sure to check that out, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, and make sure you've heard what's happened in Boston now. Make sure you're in bed by 9. All right. Or there's a curfew now in Boston, Massachusetts. I believe it's 9 o'clock. So you all best be in bed by then, because we are going to do a bed check. All right. Just saying.
Everyone turn off your devices at 8:50 and get into bed.
Okay. That's outstanding. Listen, first of all, thanks for calling in tonight. Really appreciate it. It's a fun conversation. I am going to officially now put out the challenge that a week from next Saturday, subjects permitting, schedules permitting, we are going to conduct a vice presidential debate here on the Coalition at facebook.com/Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, www.coalitionradionetwork.com, which is kind of our website, sort of a TV station for what's happening here. I'm going to reach out to one or two people, Mr. Fishman first, to see if he can moderate, and we'll take it from there. I look forward to that. I think it's got the opportunity to be a lot of fun, but also educational at the same time. Think of it as kind of a what do they used to call it? The afternoon specials. It'll be kind of like an ABC afternoon special. There'll be some jokes, some laughs, and there'll be a morality play at the very end of the show, I'm sure. So, as well as and by the way, Lucky Charms for everybody, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a favor now. If you could tell folks about what we're trying to do here. We're trying to do 3 hours a night from 9-ish till midnight, occasionally during the day. And folks, if they could just like our Facebook page, like every other Facebook page you've been asked to like this week. What did somebody say? People are begging 30-something-year-old white men not to start blogs. That's the current thing this week.
Whatever you do, generic white men, please do not start a podcast. The cutoff was whatever your state's lockdown date was. That was the cutoff for any new podcast.
Right.
So, yeah.
You and I are, in my case in particular, the word grandfathered in is entirely appropriate. So,
exactly.
Spike Buddy, thanks a lot for calling in so late tonight. And, let's talk over the next day or two. Let's nail this down. We're going to reach out. Listen, folks, we're going to put this out all over the libertarian media world, which is going to tell you who's serious about running for the vice presidency and who's just playing the game here. And you know what? The other thing, I'll leave you with one note. This is important. You know, what I've seen in the couple of conventions I've gone to, some very nice people who weren't going to get president, used the president running for the presidency to run for LNC at large, then all of a sudden for the vice president. I'm impressed by the fact that you've invested so much time in running for the vice presidency. That's been your goal since day one. That's been your motivation. And there's something to be said for that. It's pretty good. So this to me will be kind of an acid test of who's serious about running for the vice presidency, and who might be treating it as just a political ticket. But that's my opinion. But then again, hey, you know what? Not only is that my opinion, but Spike, I am station management. So there you go. All right.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate having you bring me on. Thank you so much again.
All right, buddy. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
And that's going to be it for tonight. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and, of course, the mothership at coalitionradio.us. Lots of coalitions. Folks, if you could take a moment and like us, follow us, subscribe to us, all that good stuff. This show is available to watch on the Facebook, on Periscope, on YouTube, as well as our network kind of television site, Radio Coalition, coalitionradionetwork.com. Folks, this is listener-supported media. Contributions, Patreons, we've got all that at coalitionradionetwork.com. If you could spare a few shekels, that would be great. We are commercial-free. And we've had a couple of great conversations tonight with people who are heavily invested in harm reduction and getting drugs legalized, in dealing at a street level day to day with those issues, not from some removed perspective as a legislator, not from some removed perspective as a keyboard warrior, but people who are actually doing the work of the Lord. Folks, have a wonderful night. We will see you tomorrow. Hi, this is Pat.
This is Tucker.
Well, hang on a second.
Sure.
Hey, hang on a second. I still have you. I saw you Bluetooth with my microphone. Sorry. I just got off the air literally 2 minutes ago. Anyway, so you work for Ken?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
All right, I will reach out. Just we're a very small delegation. There's only 3 of us. I'm the state chair. I'm also on the LNC. I'm an alternate for Region 8, and I'm running for Region 8. So I've decided that it would be more appropriate for me to stay neutral. And I'm involved in a lot of efforts to promote all the candidates. So I don't think it would be fair for me actually just to advocate for one side, because there's also a very small chance. Oh, can you hang on? Can you call me back in like 5 minutes?
Will do.
Thanks, buddy. Hi, this is Pat. Oh,
Go
hey.
to sleep.
No, are you kidding me? I just got off the air. I was on with Spike.
Man.
Hey, listen, what are you? Do you have an hour or two a week from Saturday?
I think so. A week from like 6 days from now.
Yeah, a week from 6 days from now. I'm gonna put a challenge out there. I'm gonna host on my new little platform here hang on a second.